mystery. I feel like Naughty Dog has wasted a lot of time this gen. Honestly, all of PlayStation has with all these live service projects that go nowhere. But Naughty Dog specifically feels really, really wasteful. It's really frustrating to see how little has been done. But it may actually be worse than we thought. Because we heard, of course, about The Last of Us Online. They worked on that from like 2019 before The Last of Us Part 2 launched. It kind of ballooned into its own standalone game when it was originally just going to be like a little mode for The Last of Us Part 2. And they worked on that until it was eventually canceled a handful of years later. After a lot of development work was done on it, they just walked away from it. And now we're getting news that they're not just working, or they haven't just been working on Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet, which is, of course, their upcoming game that Neil Druckmann has said he's taken a lot of inspiration from games like Elden Ring on it, which is very interesting. He says he likes the idea of telling stories not just through dialogue, but also through the environment and player agency and things like that. So it's going to be very different, I think, than most of their games, but still. They've said that that's their primary focus right now, but they're working on other things. However, there's a rumor, and this is, a week and a half old at this point, but I still wanted to talk about it because there's a rumor, speculation, so take it with a grain of salt, that an unannounced Naughty Dog single-player game was canceled earlier this year. This is from Gaining Bolt. Following the cancellation of the Last of Us standalone multiplayer game, Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann revealed that the studio had, quote, more than one ambitious new single-player game in development, which I remember hearing. And a lot of people were like, oh, it's The Last of Us Part 3. Might not have been. Of course, the studio revealed Intergalactic, the new sci-fi title, at the Game Awards 2024. Other single-player projects have seemingly been in the works, but according to insider Daniel RPK on Patreon, one was canceled recently. Helmed by Vineet Agarwal, I'm so sorry. Previously, the director of the online title, it was reportedly in development for more than a year and still in the early stages. He would subsequently leave Naughty Dog. Vineet Agarwal, I'm so sorry. I can't read. Hold on, 15 pop-ups because it's LinkedIn, because that's just how LinkedIn does it. You can see Santa Monica, California. Naughty Dog is listed as the current place of employment. Prior to that, though, there's been other things also going on. Another single-player title has allegedly been in development for around 3 years and is led by Sean Escaig of Marvel Avengers fame. Sean Escaig, this guy, you've probably seen him in some promotional videos and stuff. He worked on The Lost Legacy, Transformers Dark of the Moon. And if we go here, again, LinkedIn, you gotta love it. If we go down, been working pretty hard on this, liked by him, okay. Where's his, does he not have his job listings? I don't see that. Doesn't look like it. Probably smart that he doesn't put where he's working. But he has worked on Marvel Avengers, which we all kind of know how that went. Not great. But he worked on that, and then he worked at Naughty Dog for a little while. No further details are known, though it could be Uncharted Drake's Fortune remake that was rumored last year. And if you don't remember this, there was a rumor that they were remaking the first game in the Uncharted series, and they were doing it potentially in-house. There's rumors that they might be working with a partner, kind of like how BGS just recently did the Oblivion remake, remaster, whatever, where they had a partner, but they also worked on it a lot. So it wasn't clear what was happening or if they were doing the same thing here, but it was rumored that that was one of the projects in development. However, this has seemingly also been canceled. Okay. So, like, there's been multiple projects that Naughty Dog has worked on in the last generation that have just been worked on for a handful of years and then they get canned. And I don't know if this is because they're just looking at it and being like, it's not going to return a profit. Or maybe they just weren't working out too great. Or maybe they think Heretic Prophet is going to be so good that they need all hands on deck. We don't know. But again, it just kind of reaffirms the idea that they've wasted so much time and money and effort working on these things that never see the light of day. It's wild. And you compare it then to some of the other more prolific developers this generation, like Obsidian. Obsidian's been cranking out games recently. And, even the, not Haven, the guys, they did It Takes Two. Hazelight has even been pumping out more games where they released in 2021 the game of the year, It Takes Two, and then they just this year put out another game, Split Fiction, that was also phenomenally well received. So I just don't like it's crazy how you have these teams that are very big, very capable, but then they get into these ruts where they just don't do anything for a decade. Just nothing. And I don't know how that happens, but they certainly get rusty. And I don't know how it possibly could be so prevalent within PlayStation specifically. But man, it's really, really bizarre. So shout out to The Last of Us online project that died so these other games could live and then be killed later. Holla. Hooray. But hopefully they actually get Heretic Prophet out the door at a reasonable amount of time, and that is good. I guess we'll see. How many of the devs that worked on Uncharted and The Last of Us are even still there? Because the problem in recent years is that our games aren't being made by the team that created the originals that we love. A lot of them are still there. The difference at Naughty Dog is seemingly that they changed company culture a lot after The Last of Us Part 2, and they got rid of crunch. And crunch culture at Naughty Dog was kind of like water and being wet. It was just understood. If you are at Naughty Dog, you will crunch a lot. It's just how it is. And then they fixed that and they improved it, and the studio culture, and it's much healthier now, which is a good thing. But I think that's also caused their games to take way, way longer to make. And that also means that their process of iteration has slowed as well. It used to be that they could cram 60, 70 hours of work a week out of their employees, and that allowed them to get much further along much faster, and so they could cancel or iterate much faster, and they were also much more focused. But I think as after the PS4 era, it was pretty clear PlayStation wanted more IP. They didn't want to just be doing sequels upon sequels upon sequels for the next decade or two. They wanted some fresh ideas and some fresh IP. So they greenlit some more like experimental projects, but those have also gone basically nowhere. And a lot of them have been canceled. So it's unfortunate, but it seems like there's multiple layers of problems within Sony's leadership right now for these projects. Yeah, Naughty Dog is good at retaining talent. Yeah, in general they are. There's been some people who have left because working at Sony or at Naughty Dog until recently was very draining. You'd work on Uncharted, crunching your ass off for years and years and years, and then you finally get the game out the door, and it's just like, I need a break. I need to go do something else. And a lot of them did. A lot of them went off and did something else. Now that the company culture is way better, I think they've been able to retain a lot of talent and stuff, but still.
Red Pill University. Oh boy, oh boy.
Last In the last 5 years, some really beautiful and detailed games have released. Cyberpunk, Stalker 2, Black Myth Wukong, Kingdom Come 2, Metro Exodus, and so many others. Yet looking even as recent as 10 years back, these older games look and feel somehow much more cleaner, sharper, and even maybe more detailed or prettier. So, what happened in the last 5 years that made nearly every high-quality game look so ugly, filled with grainy visuals or artifacting or ghosting lines, or just simply looked like smeary blurry mess as if somebody rubbed Vaseline in your eyes, while also producing fewer frames per second, even though today's hardware is far more capable? Have modern game graphics regressed in their pursuit to push higher resolution textures, more detailed models, or even more complex lighting? Who or what is to be blamed for the industry smearing Vaseline in our eyes? Well, let's find out. Over the years, game developers have tried all manner of methods to push the game graphics forward. However, along with that also comes the question of, who cares? After all, the recent Battlefield 2044 failure, while the success of something as low poly as BattleBit, at least on the launch, are a perfect example of how gameplay is the king. Even the more recent success of Schedule 1 or something as old and as living dumpster fire nightmare as Roblox lends some credence to the notion that gameplay is what the gamers want first of all. "Oh, but that does not look cool in screenshots," says the marketing man. "How are we gonna entice and or trick people into buying yet another modern slop action game, like for example Star Wars Outlaws, if the game looks old or, gods forbid, low quality?" And then Ubisoft proceeds to make the first ever quadruple A game, Skull and Bones, that looks like this.
I don't owe you a sliver up your ass.
Now the point being, these big games keep pushing graphics because, well, people are idiots. It's a lot easier to convince someone that the game is of high quality if it has pretty visuals. And there is a certain truth to having good looking game and it being fun to play, mainly thanks to the good looks. However, I noticed that, especially in the last 5 years, majority of the best looking games that put emphasis on graphics actually have been looking really bad. Like noticeably worse than 10, if not 15-year-old games before them. And so that prompted me to take a look at the history of game graphics and why they fail. And maybe we can spot why the modern game in particular seems to look worse than its predecessors. Let's then start with the infamous piss filter. The golden shower era of gaming was the start of art directors trying to incestuously copy each other, abandoning all semblance of reason for style, just because Cliffy B's Gears of War and a few other titles were hyper popular. Now thankfully this era is done and gone. However, tinting and coloring your games in a certain degree still happens. Like for example the recent Starfield having a different type of a filter depending on what planet you visit, and that being very pronounced. See, normally a little bit of filtering here and there is not a bad thing. However, when those filters are a bit too much, you start to realize why reshade mods that remove these filters are so popular. See, a good filter adds a style or a tone. A bad one makes it look like piss.
Welcome back to the army, soldier. Shit.
Alright, now that we're good and lubed up, let's start with the first horseman of bad visual apocalypse. The bloom, motion blur, and depth of field. Now back in mid-2000s, bloom became one of the first post-processing effects that, shall we say, had a certain look. Now, while bloom overall helps to emphasize some glowing objects, back in those early days, developers simply cranked it up for everything, turning your screen into a lightly Vaseline-smeared mess.
So we begin at nope, I'm stopping again. Notice how the sky is so bright and vibrant while the terrain is dark as oil? Well, a lot of games in the mid-2000s had horrendous lighting, not because of technology limitations, but because a lot of art directors collectively lost their damn minds. See, around this time, graphics technology was able to add a full-screen bloom effect via hardware. So because it was new, developers decided it was the answer to everything. I honestly can't understand how anyone thought this was a good idea. I think this is hideous. I mean, sure, this might be good as a special effect, like looking at the sun or during an explosion, but no, just smear it on absolutely everything and call that progress.
Now today, thankfully, developers have learned to use this method sparingly and in right places. But even with that, plenty of mods exist only to remove this effect alone. Now as for motion blur and depth of field, oh fuck me sideways. Ever since developers got access to programmable shaders and could read the depth buffer, that is, get information of how far certain pixels are from the screen, the industry-wide cinematic evolution has taken hold. Well, hey, you know, real-life cameras have focal lengths, and the bokeh effect where the background is blurred in the background, yeah, is very cinematic. So let's make our games more cinematic with more cinema, so that we can cinematic ourselves into the grave. Now this effect was the worst thing in FPS games, my favorite genre, and that's why I'm also today presenting so many FPS games. Now sure, in real life your eyes focuses on the thing that you're looking at. However, when you're looking at the screen, you're not just looking at the middle of it, don't you? And so at the best of cases, depth of field is an annoying effect, and at worst, it actively harms your gameplay. But it's not all bad. For cutscenes, or if you want to hide how low quality models are in the distance for LOD, it still can be a cool effect. However, the same cannot be said about motion blur, another effect that is made to simulate how our eyes and cameras work. Now, unlike depth of field, this actively ruins gameplay every time it's included, and you can thank console peasantry for its widespread adoption. See, more than anything, motion blur, in early days and even today, is used to hide inconsistent frame rates, which consoles running at 30 FPS were doing constantly. This is why motion blur in some games is automatically turned on, even on the lowest settings. And while sure, while you're watching this video, you probably think, well, it looks pretty nice and it's more pleasant to look at. However, while playing the game, you expect the picture to be sharp and clear and consistent, and that's not what motion blur is. It's a smeary, blurry mess, and hence the intense hatred for it. It's also kind of funny that Activision Blizzard, out of all the things, have found a way to make this effect even more annoying in the modern Call of Duty reboots. Instead of motion blurring the environment as you're turning around, by default, there's also motion blur on your weapons. At first, I seriously thought that my eyes were going crazy, but no, after filming and looking back at the footage, I was not crazy. This is how bad the blur looks. The grainy piece of shit! LOD, or level of detail, an optimization method that improves performance by simply replacing faraway models with lower complexity ones. The most hilarious example in a modern game you can see is in Cyberpunk, where they simply opted for badly looking sprites. However, the transition between the low poly model and the higher detail one can often be very jarring. Or the game engine can shit its pants and remove the object completely, like in Cyberpunk. Or like in Skyrim, simply pop the model into the scene. So in order to smooth out this transition, you can do a bunch of things, and what game developers as long back as Crysis 1 have opted for is dithering. And I utterly despise this method. But you see, what makes this effect worse is the developers tend to put this transitioning effect speed very slowly, so this is where you notice it. And also very often it's very close to the camera too, whereas in Crysis 1 it was only used for the distant objects. And also dithering effect is very dependent on your resolution. The bigger the screen, the smaller the effect, as you can see here. And more importantly, the closer to the camera it is, the more brazen this effect becomes, like for example in Cyberpunk. Now sure, the alternative is either to model pop-in as with no transitions like in Skyrim, or expensive alpha channel blends that most often don't look that much better either. And that's kind of the thing, the dithering effect is often used for transparency replacement. And yet game developers also have used this effect on something like particle effects or hair, which outside of stylized game look is horrible. And the worst case example you can immediately notice in Cyberpunk's plants. Notice how plants seem to be boiling, which is most noticeable in 720p since it's bigger pixels and bigger dithering effect. Now I'm no graphics programmer or an artist, so what the hell do I know, but to me this looks bad, and CDPR should feel bad. But worst of all, why do plants need dithering effect in the first place when they're not LOD swapping? So the only assumption I'm left with is that the plants are so complex that letting them be rendered full-on, like hair without dithering, would cause massive performance issues. And I'm sorry, but at that point, have you heard of model optimization? Now sure, Cyberpunk has some genuinely amazing things in it, but shit like this makes my blood boil. And sure, I get it, dithering is very performance cost effective compared to alpha blending, but it looks like complete ass. Now see, it's one thing to use dithering for LOD transitions far away, and the closer it gets to the camera, the worse it gets. But it's a whole other thing to leave that effect on full display shamelessly. Case in point, Stalker 2. Now I can only hazard a guess as to why dithering effect is still left on the trees. Now maybe it really is the Unreal Engine 5's nanite LOD optimization, but if that's the case, I get another reason to say fuck nanite. But hold on, if developers used to use this transition back in the day only for the distant targets, why are games like Stalker 2 using it in static objects in the distance? Or like in Cyberpunk, on plants so close to the camera that you could reach out and touch it even? Well, because they know they can get away with it, thanks to another technique that turns stuff like this into this. Which leads us nicely into anti-aliasing, the friend and foe of gaming, aiming to provide greater visual clarity free of jaggies or pixel stair-stepping at the cost of some performance. Undisputed best method for this is super sampling. This method simply renders a higher resolution image and then downscales it to your native resolution, which allows for the best pixel smoothing. However, SSAA comes at an extreme performance hit, so all the other anti-aliasing methods aim to replicate the visual clarity while lowering the performance hit, be that through detecting only edges and smoothing those, or sampling every pixel multiple times. So where's the failure in that? Well, there isn't, as a matter of fact. Since we're talking about the visual clarity of the games, SSAA is an example of actual success that is simply needed for a context. Temporal anti-aliasing, the smelly king of bullshit. Basically, every anti-aliasing method aims to replicate what the SSAA is capable of, or, in lieu of that, at least smooth out the jaggies. However, unlike most other aliasing methods, TAA stands out as the method that utilizes past frames, with additional technical mumbo-jumbo that I bet only I give a fuck about, so let's move on. What most people will know this method for is one thing. It smears your screen with Vaseline, and unlike Bloom, it's everywhere, especially in things that move fast. So, you know, gameplay. However, there is a positive to this technique and why it's used today. It's really fast. And then pair it with an option to render the frame at a lower resolution and then upscale it and smooth it out with TAA creates a relatively impressive quality. Hence, certain developers really love it because of the performance boost. In fact, the first game ever to utilize this anti-aliasing method apparently was Battleforge, developed by Microsoft. Oh no! Look at that, the game is dead. Well, remember kids, support stopped killing games. So instead, the first game that you can still play with this method is Rise, Son of Rome, apparently. And what a surprise, Crytek made it as well. From gaming graphics giants to gaming graphics slayers. What a terrible curse you have unleashed on the industry. And yet the ghoulification of game graphics don't stop simply with the smearing. Since this is a temporal method, meaning that the time involvement is there, or more specifically TAA uses the past frame data to approximate which pixels need blurring more, this means the further ruination of anything in motion. So as soon as you start moving, especially in fast-paced games, most notably FPS games where you whip your camera around, the overall experience only gets worse. And we're not stopping there either. Ghosting also becomes a thing. Jesus fucking Christ. Now, okay, sure, this implementation is a rather rare edge case, but trust me, even mild ghosting gets pretty annoying. And not to stop there either, it will only get worse from here on. So then, why? Why do developers insist on using these more and more clearly visually degrading methods? Well, I told you. Performance. See, because TAA allows developers to render the frame at a lower resolution and smear it out with TAA with relatively little visual fidelity loss, and I struggle to use those words. Sure, while the camera is slowly panning around, or better yet, on a still frame, yeah, there is very little noticeable degradation. So, who cares what you think, stinky idiots? My game's marketing team says the screenshots look great! It's beyond infuriating how widespread this gaslighting of TAA acceptance has become. Sure, it might be good for still frames, but guess what 99% of the games do with their gameplay? Have action and loads of movement in it! And this is exactly where the greatest graphics ever get utterly destroyed. Oh, but it's worth it, right? At least it smears out the dithering effect and makes it look almost acceptable. And yeah, that is true, that's the only positive of TAA. It makes another effect almost palatable. Which is why developers think that they can afford shoving dithering effect right in your face. Hooray! You did it! You saved hair and particle effects! Whoopee! Oh, but hold on. Why then the cyberpunk plants still look like complete ass? Oh yeah, right, we forgot that TAA also introduces ghosting! Oh, but come on, Yumix, it's just an effect, it's optional! You can disable it, right? And here's the thing with many games like Cyberpunk or game engines like Unreal Engine 5, they are relying on TAA always to be there in order to make the gameplay look like what the artist had designed in the first place. And many of them go a step above to prevent you from changing anti-aliasing method. And like in, for example, Cyberpunk, while you can't technically remove TAA, you have to do it through mods. That's how ingrained this method has become. It's no longer an option, it's a necessity. A necessity to ruin game graphics, whatever quality they might have been. And it only got worse, goddammit, while replaying some old great looking games, like for example Metro Exodus, while running into some game breaking bugs. Yeah, all Metro games are really poorly QA tested, but that's not the focus today. I originally thought that, this is one of the last games that didn't use TAA. But while I was aiming at something, you know, having an important gameplay focus moment, There it was, ghosting, in the worst possible place, in your crosshairs. Now, since you can change quite a bit of things through config file rather than in-game settings, another annoyance of mine, but regardless, you could turn off TAA as well. So, I did. Jesus fucking Christ! The first frame remains and breaks the visuals. What the hell? That was kind of a weird thing on the first launch, but regardless, where there's TAA, there's always dithering effect, and hence, here it is, in all of its splendor and ugliness. Sure, it is used for the distant stuff and so on and so forth, however, in Metro Exodus especially, turning off TAA will also turn off some lighting effects and some smoke stuff, or something. But the point is, do you need any more evidence that games these days expect you to blur the screen in order to have quote-unquote expected experience, especially visually? And having full resolution, sharp image is no longer being given as an option. See, the thing is, once every about 5 years I buy the best possible PC on the market. In this case, just recently I did that. And the Red Commie, as I call it, finally can run 4K ultra settings on pretty much every game I choose. And for me, every time I do this, it's really fun to not boot up the latest, greatest games, but old ones that used to be the top of the line, best looking games, and seeing how well they run today. That used to be the case for Crysis, now it is for Cyberpunk, and a few other ones as well, as you can see. At the 4K ultra settings and 200 frames a second is just wonderful. The image is crisp, sharp, and the game, even on the 4K, still holds up. That's so cool. However, the more recent the game, the more I notice ugly crap being pushed onto us while running on those ultra settings, those maximum graphics. And the more recent the game, the more I see developers just saying, fuck you, here's Vaseline on your screen. It just makes me sad. And even if you can remove temporal aliasing in options like in Stalker 2, or through mods like in Cyberpunk, the dithering effect will remain unless you get your hands on source code of the game, so good luck with that. So when it comes to the best looking games in today's market, you either choose a very grainy dither effect filled game, or a smeary one with temporal aliasing. Because there currently exists no other effect that smooths it out like temporal aliasing, while remaining the proper quality, without artifacting, ghosting, or just a Vaseline look. Oh, and don't you worry, like I said, it only gets worse from here on. Let's talk about upscalers! Yay! Kill me! So then, upscalers in recent 5 years have become the biggest performance crutch for genuinely incompetent developers, to a point that now there are games out there using upscalers as part of their recommended and minimum spec. Case in point, the recent Monster Hunter Wilds. Right, additional notes. SSD required, this game is expected to run 1080p. Okay. Upscaled to 720 native resolution, 30 FPS on the lowest graphics set. Jesus fucking Christ! And this game does not look like something that would need an upscaler to run on modern hardware at an acceptable frame rate. So clearly, instead of optimizing the game properly, let's just slap a lower resolution frame and call it an acceptable way to play it at a higher, because of fakey fake bullshit. Oh, but that's not all! Oh, recommended spec. Additional notes. SSD required. This game is expected to run 1080p, 60 FPS. Oh, that's pretty... hold on. With frame generation enabled. Under the medium graphics setting... Excuse me? What? Yeah, we're gonna get into the fake frame generation soon, but first the upscalers themselves. So then, originally DLSS and FSR were used to allow high-resolution gaming than is possible currently on hardware.
The TLDR then is this. AMD's best puts up a valiant effort for the $500 price difference against the 3090, sometimes coming close or even beating it at 8K. But only sometimes. It still falls short in more demanding titles, even with its greater overclocking headroom, which only serves to further highlight the importance of technologies like DLSS and how much not having it is holding AMD back right now. And not just in ray tracing either. Outside of Doom Eternal, which surprisingly was quite a bit smoother on AMD, GDDR6 seems to be helping NVIDIA out tremendously. Because remember, 8K is 4 times the number of pixels as 4K. Just the frame buffer alone, That is, each frame displayed on the screen is nearly 128 megabytes, which is exactly enough to hobble the 6000 series 128 megabytes of ridiculously fast Infinity Cache, leaving them with memory that's just over half as fast as Ampere's for everything else. With that said, if AMD had a DLSS analog to reduce this memory footprint, AMD might have been more competitive more often. So then, is 8K gaming a lie? Well, it's complicated. While I participated in some of NVIDIA's early promotion for 8K gaming on the RTX 3090, and it does work in the same way that a primitive hammer can pound in a nail, it's clear that it's not practical for every game today, and as more visually elaborate titles trickle out over the next few years, new hammers will be much more appropriate tools to handle them at this resolution. While you might roll your eyes and say, who cares? Nobody has an 8K monitor. The same was true for 4K a short while ago, and even if you only use a 4K display, super sampling or running at a higher resolution than native, then downscaling it is still the best way to reduce shimmering and other artifacts while preserving 100% of the detail in an image. And 4x super sampling at 4K means rendering at 8K. Anyway, the main takeaway is that neither AMD nor NVIDIA is even close to creating a GPU that can natively run 8K maxed out AAA games, and that upscaling tricks are here to stay.
And that's the thing, upscaling technologies are great to reach these super high resolutions like 16K or even 8K. Or, and this is where it really shined the most, allowing the lowest power devices, like for example Steam Deck, to run more modern games in the first place, like Cyberpunk. Now sure, you'll still be running a lower resolution image, but with extra processing you can claw back a little bit of visual fidelity, while the leftover performance from that drop allows you to get better performance overall, going from a cinematic 30 FPS to a proper 60 perhaps, on those low power devices like your grandpa's PC or a Steam Deck. Now what these tools are not okay is for incompetent developers to call their unoptimized games to be called playable at 60 FPS as long as you're using upscalers. Honestly, this kind of shit should be illegal. And in case of Monster Hunter, it really is the case of, hey, you can run our games at 1080p so long as you drop the resolution and not play in 1080p. Idiot. Or what about Cyberpunk? Every single graphics preset is set up to enable FSR. How fucked is that? So does that mean that the game and the developers are telling me that an ultra quality preset, the best possible quality, is achieved in their minds with FSR? But that's not all. It's not just about dropping resolution and calling it a day. If you might have noticed that upscalers today do resemble quite a lot of temporal anti-aliasing, just with a sharpening filter with extra effects on top of it. Which, frankly, they kinda are. Smeary visuals? Check. And emotion increases smeariness? Check. Ghosting? Oh hell yes, even more than TAA alone. Honestly, it's gotten so bad that I can play any game and within 10 seconds I can determine not only what upscaler is being used, but also what setting the developer has set up for the current graphics setting. And hey, you want to see just how bad the upscaling bullshit can go? I present you Stalker 2. This is a crisp 4K image with epic setting. And this is Stalker 2 Potato Pizzetz Edition. Yep, do take in the horror and the disgusting nature of the zone. Notice that the game now looks so bad that you can't tell whether or not you're looking at Vadim's face or his ass. And so tell me, how did any developer, especially an artist, allow this kind of visual to go on their game? But okay, let's say that it's all in the name of performance. Well, tell me then, where the fuck is my performance going? This kind of crap is struggling to reach 160 frames a second, while at the same time Crysis 1 from 2007, at maximum settings and 1080p, manages over 200. About the same frame rate as Cyberpunk can do on absolute lowest settings. And yeah, you could say that this is not a fair comparison, but honestly, who cares? Fact of the matter is, just like I previously mentioned with the TAA, now upscalers are almost expected as mandatory. Because like TAA, it smears out things like the dithering effect, it's a benefit all around, except for us, the player. So, like I said previously, either you enjoy full-scale native resolution, low frame rate but crisp image, or have to suck it up and enjoy a smeary mess. And sadly, there is no in-between. And this trend, more than anything, has made the modern games look far worse than the games in previous years. And I gotta emphasize this again, so listen carefully. This is the problem. The reason why people hate temporal aliasing or upscaler look is not just because it's an optional thing, because it has become mandatory thing. Because so many of these greatest graphics ever games most often don't even allow you to turn it off. And when they do, the picture turns into a grainy bullshit. Oh, and speaking of grainy picture, especially when we're talking about Stalker 2, this is an Unreal 5 game, and every single game using this engine has to use baked-in Lumen for lighting calculations. Now, there are plenty of problems with Lumen, but most notably, it tries to emulate ray tracing even if the graphics card you're using doesn't have any ray tracing cores. Hence, the shadows without any aliasing constantly seem to be dithering or jittering around. And this is why recent Unreal games have been looking so grainy without any aliasing. And that's kind of the thing with the ray tracing overall. It also relies on denoisers as well as temporal aliasing to smear things out in order to look somewhat palatable. And yet again, personally, I would much rather prefer a grainy, noisy picture if that would mean I would see the detail in it. And trust me, ray tracing is the future of game graphics in my opinion. The only thing that is stopping us right now is the fact that hardware is just too weak. So in time, it will come. But until then, well, we have to rely on additional approximation technologies. But returning to TAA, it seems that game developers in the last 10 years especially have been sold the dream of how temporal anti-aliasing will improve the performance while retaining the visual quality.
We wanted to have really clean and stable images for this game. And in early 2014, we began looking into temporal anti-aliasing. And I whipped up a quick first implementation of this based on what was available on the internet and in my own head, and it quickly became our primary anti-aliasing solution during production.
And this propagated lie has been going on for so long that the uglification of our games have resulted in game engines expecting you to use upscalers in the first place. And so it's not just my feeling that something's been ruining the game visuals in recent years, it's clearly visible to all. Temporal anti-aliasing is used and abused. Lazy developers implement upscalers as crutches for performance, while the game engine developers, you know the ones, sell them the lie of, oh well, the automatic optimizer algorithms like Nanite will do the work for you so you can go back to making worlds you love. But guess what? None of the current automatic optimization algorithms or methods actually work, and they're similar in the stupidity of vibe coding. Now, sure, they are better than nothing, but they are far and away from competing with the age-old traditional manual optimization. And while one day ray tracing will eventually solve these problems, hardware today is not yet there. And I get it, optimization does take a lot of time and effort, but it is worth it. And like I said near the start, gameplay is king. So tell me, what kind of a gameplay can you have with the stuttery, low frame rate mess, even if you have the best graphics in the world? And yes, this definitely is a stab at Star Citizen. And more than that, what the hell is the point of the best graphics in the world if you're gonna be required to smear them in order to get the full quote-unquote quality out of it? I look out in horror as genuinely great-looking games and hard-working artists who poured their souls and efforts into creating something genuinely beautiful and awe-inspiring, to get obliterated, ruined, and erased in one fell swoop by a horribly disgusting method. So fuck temporal anti-aliasing.
It can predict the future, generating 3 additional frames for every frame that we calculate.
Oh fuck, we still got the topic to talk about. Alright, so yeah, remember Monster Hunter and its recommended spec asking for frame generation in order to meet the bare minimum of 60 FPS on 1080p? Yeah, fucking hell, the parody is writing itself now. Hey guys, our game will be 60 FPS so long as you agree that missing or still frames are still real frames, right? Oh Jesus, the I identify as a real frame joke is now writing itself. However, as fake as frame generation is, well, it actually works. Well, kind of. Now let's take for example, Stalker 2 again. The feeling of extra frames really can make the experience a bit more enjoyable. However, for FPS games, this is a very noticeable and undesirable technique. Now sure, you gain the frame fluidity, which is really nice, but the latency, at best, is the same, of the original low frame rate. So you still notice the delay, and shall we say, it all kind of turns into jello-y feeling. Still, for more narrative-based games, honestly, I would say that this is a pretty good technology. However, Nvidia decided that, nah, that's too good. Let's fuck with the concept of game graphics somehow with this technology too. Presenting not just one fake frame for every normal frame, but how about 3 of them? And they all look like shit. No, seriously, ever since the Nvidia 50 series GPUs, the 3 fake frames per 1 real frame method actually measurably is another step into the dumpster fire.
Frame generation serves as a smoothing solution between frames. Because it's artificially generating frames to insert, we can regularly observe issues where not all fake frames are created fake equal. In this frame by fake frame, you can see issues with trailing or leading edge objects in motion as they leave ghosting or sparkling in their wake. In some instances, user interfaces distort and duplicate during fake frames. And during multi-frame generation, during multi-frame generation, sorry, I didn't say that alike. Right.
So, what the hell did we even learn today? Well, game developers do from time to time come up with some great visuals and games to keep progressing the visual spectacle and fidelity. There is no doubt about that. At the same time, in efforts of trying to optimize and improve performance, the race to the bottom has truly kicked in, where all subtlety and carefully masked effects like dithering, fading for LODs in the distance now is pushed into our faces, while using uglier and uglier effects to hide the previous effects' flaws. TAA used to mask the dithering effect, sharpening filters used to mask the smeariness of TAA, and ultimately lower resolutions paired with the TAA smeariness and sharpening effects used to mask the lack of optimization and general performance, along of course with the frame generation, which leads the games to neither looking good nor running well. So you're left wondering, what the hell was even the point? And even though game artists are designing ever more beautiful models and worlds for us to play in, their beautiful art is instantly eroded and ruined as soon as you start having gameplay, thanks to upscalers. Now I ask developers of these cutting-edge graphically impressive games, what the fuck is the point of your artists making these high-detail worlds if you'll ruin it by smearing Vaseline everywhere? Also that only screenshots look hyper-detailed for your marketing team? No, seriously, how can any art or performance teams look at the footage like this and not feel ashamed? Where the hell is the quality? Where are my graphics? And in lieu of that, where the fuck is my performance at then? But all that doom and gloom aside, there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Stalker 2 still looks amazing if they get the performance running. Cyberpunk could be better if they actually worked on the fucking LOD properly and removed the TAA and dithering effects up close. And for Starfield, yeah, moving on. Even though Unreal Engine in particular has been pushing the temporal smearing bullshit the hardest, and other major engine developers following suit, such games as Doom Eternal and Kingdom Come 2 at least beating Crysis 1 on the lowest graphics settings while still looking better is sign of a good progress. This is the result of not perfect but good optimization, especially in the case of Doom Eternal, as well as a lot better and newer graphics API, but still, at the very least we know that not every game or engine developer has been sucking the TAA, upscaling and frame generation Kool-Aid. So, what about you folks? What do you think? Have games gotten worse looking? Or is Javish just yelling at a cloud again? And since we're on the topic, which game trends or features in your mind have been the biggest failures of game graphics? Do let me know down below. But most of all, remember, fuck TAA. And support my fight for better game graphics by visiting my Patreon down below. Support your fight for better visuals and not more smeary nonsense like these fine folk. I'm out. Bleh.
Well, everyone, it seems that Star Citizen has officially overstepped. The developers have ticked off the most hardcore Star Citizen fans, and the whole community is revolting after spending $800 million on the game. I know that sounds like a fake headline that they've raised that much and that those same people are upset about, but no, truly, they've actually gone that far and people have had enough. And I'm going to show all of it to you because it's crazy. It's insane. I do want to say at the outset that I've played Star Citizen, okay? People think it's not a real game. It is. You can actually download it and play it. We've played it on stream over on Luke Stevens Live, my second channel. We flew a bunch of ships around different planets. We did some missions. We did some quests. We went and at one point held a funeral for one of the players that met an unfortunate end, and we flew up into the atmosphere and dumped his body out the back of it while like all sorts of fireworks were blaring. It was awesome. It was crazy cool. And so there is a game here to be played, and some people take it very, very seriously. There's different play styles, whether it's mining or racing or broader role play where some people get into orgs or organizations with other players. And these can be groups of dozens or hundreds or thousands of people that are working together to do quests and do things within the universe. It's super, super cool. Some of the tech they're also using here is insane. Like, for example, they did a Star Engine demo, I believe last year, where they showcased a bunch of the cool stuff they were able to do. And it basically was one gigantic middle finger to Starfield. Like everything that that game wanted to do, this engine is capable of, whether it's seamless transitions from planet surfaces into caves, into buildings with NPCs, back out into the atmosphere, across the solar system to a different planet, or to a space station floating around a nebula. Like, it's insane what they're able to do here with seamless data streaming. It's really remarkable. But as most people are all too aware, remarkable things often require remarkable budgets. And that certainly is true with Star Citizen. They've raised over $800 million at this point from 5.6 million different people. And every time I check on this number, it's gone up by an insane amount. It's just wild how much money they make with this. And as you can see, if you go to like monthly earnings, you can see that like in November of last year, they brought in $20 million in a month. Granted, the game like doesn't technically, like it's not in 1.0. It's not fully released or anything. This one, like in December, they made just around $18 million. It's crazy. Granted, they only made 7.5 during January, February, but they're starting to recover. And as they hold more events, they make more money. But it's wild the amount of money they take in. It's really crazy. And in case you're wondering how they actually make that money, it's with bundles and packs like this. So for example, if you want to get into the game, you have to buy a starter pack that maybe has like a $45 ship. If we go here to game packages, you can see that one down here, the Aurora MR starter pack. And this is where most people start. They pay 45 bucks, they get access to the game, and then they can work their way either to earn some of these ships in game, or they can pay real world money in order to get the ships that are persistent. That's right, because if you grind for like 6 months to get enough in-game money to buy a super awesome ship that is like $1,000 in the real world, they do regular data wipes, which will delete that. So you have to re-grind for it. But if you paid real money, you get to keep it wipe to wipe. Makes sense. I mean, obviously it would be insane if they took away the thing you bought, but just to be clear, that's how they kind of keep people engaged, is just as they grind for the ship, they might wipe it, so you have to start over. So that's why people get pushed into just buying it so that they don't have to worry about that. Because again, this is perhaps one of the more crucial things to understand. If you're watching this channel, if you're watching a Luke Stevens video, chances are you're just a gamer. Like, you like playing a bunch of different little things, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and that's great. I work the same way. However, a lot of the people that are playing Star Citizen, this is their hobby. Like, all they play is Star Citizen. They're not really gamers in the same sense of the word that like you and I probably count as it. They are Star Citizen fans. And because it's like a video game, they technically get like lumped into that. But they take it very, very seriously, and they are in deep in Star Citizen. They have in some cases spent hundreds or thousands, or in some cases tens of thousands of dollars on these different packs. Like, I don't know if this is real or an inside joke or something that I'm not aware of, but this like Praetorian pack, this Twitch streamer that streams Star Citizen says that he bought it and has it now, and it's worth $15,000. $15,000. That's insane. You know, it's crazy. I guess, you know, this is like the ultimate tax write-off. I would love to sit in on the conversation with the IRS when you're trying to explain how this is a tax write-off for your business. But still, I mean, I guess if you need to spend money, this is a good way to do it because there's always a new pit to throw it into. But Jesus, it comes with 66 ships and 105 different items. Wild, absolutely wild. But that's why they've raised over $800 million, okay? That's why. But this is also why it's all the more remarkable that despite all of this, they have managed, the developers, to tick off these very same people to the point where a lot of them are talking about potentially walking away and giving up on the game until they make major changes. It's pretty remarkable. And I know you're wondering, Luke, what could they possibly have done to tick off their own community that badly? Just you wait. As I pull it up in another tab and I stall for time, I'm just going to tell you that I have a newsletter I put together every week with my team. We send it out. It's completely free. All you have to do is put your email address in. You get it. And it's shipped to your inbox every Friday. It's super easy, super chill. It just has gaming news stories, some write-ups I do regularly. We were already collecting that data and information for the streams and stuff. We were doing coverage of news stories anyways. So we figured, put it together in a newsletter, send it out to people, share it with the community. So if you're interested, links below, sign up. Again, it's free. It's an awesome time. So check that out if you're interested. But okay, what did they do, Luke? What was so crazy bad? Well, there's this ship that's been in production for a very long time called the Idris. And this was supposed to be one of the big reveals for this year, was that this ship was finally going to go into the game. This was finally going to be something that you could play with, bring it into the game with your friends. And so they did a behind the ships presentation discussing this. And to be fair, the ship looks really, really cool. For most people, this is going to cost about $1,900 to buy, $1,500 for others. I've seen both prices listed. I'm not totally sure where it lands, but somewhere between $1,500 and $1,900, depending, I think, on like your relationship with the company and whether you're like a partner, blah, 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 something like that. It has like a hangar. You can bring tanks into it. And this is a ship that's so massive, just to man all of the guns and turrets and stuff, you need 12 crew. And if you want to also be able to like operate the ship and fly it, you need even more. So this is a ship targeting an organization, so a crew of players that's like 15, 20, 30 people strong. And they're all online at the same time, all loaded into the ship, all working together to operate it and to complete missions and stuff together. Cool in concept, I get it. But that's also why I think they can justify charging so much for it, because they're like, yeah, it's $1,500, but across 30 people, that's not actually that bad, which I can sort of understand if you're like, hey, it's only $50 a pop. That's not that crazy. Sure, I guess, but it still is $1,500. Like, it's still so much, man. It's crazy. But anyway, they showed off a lot of this. People got excited and be like, oh, that's interesting. But there's a couple of other little tidbits you need to understand about this. As part of this announcement, they revealed, of course, that it was going to be launching with all sorts of different various like attachments and things that can make it more useful. These turrets, for example, that you see, typically they need to be manned. However, there are certain things that you can use to basically have them be AI controlled so that they auto aim, so you can fly the ship even without a full crew. Sounds good, right? Those are called like AI blades, is my understanding. And they're basically like mods that you clip into a weapon or a system or a ship to make them operate the way that you want them to, or a different way. Maybe it increases the rate of fire, or it just allows them to freely like lock on aim without you needing to have somebody manning in the turret. Cool idea. And they also have things called blades that also are just broader vehicle mods that you can use on a big ship like this, or even smaller ships that they have designed them for. And these can do things like increase top speed but make it less maneuverable, or increase maneuverability but decrease the top speed. Again, they're basically just mods that you clip into like your ship's computer, if you think of it that way. And this all initially sounds fine, like, oh, new attachments and stuff for your ship. And that's why as people started reading the announcement from Freya at CIG on this forum post, people weren't that worried about it. But as they got deeper into the post, they started to see some worrisome trends. And then like the big humdinger was revealed, which is basically just that these are going to be available for sale exclusively for a limited time. As you can see here, they have all these different flight blade kits available from $18 to $15 to $30. So the bigger the ship is and the more useful it'll be, the more expensive it is. And to be clear, these are things that directly affect the power and capability of your ships in the game. So even if somebody bought a $100 ship and somebody else grinded for it in game to get the same ship, but with the in-game currency, if the person who spent more money just bought for an extra $22 or whatever, the Scorpius series flight blade kit and attached it, their ship is now just automatically better. And as of right now, it seems that there is no way to acquire these in game. They are exclusively available as a pledge for $22 or 18 or 8 or 10 or 15, whatever, until some point in the future. Some people are saying they heard somebody say 3 months. Others are saying 6 months. Other people are saying there has been no confirmation. So we just don't know right now. But either way, they are locking behind a paywall. Many paywalls, I guess, very small paywalls, contrasted to the broader paywall that's all over the place with the $1,500 ships and stuff. But they are paywalling little bitty upgrades like this. And people are just finally like having enough, because paired with this was also an announcement that they're paywalling other stuff. They're paywalling bomb racks, which allow you to basically have bombs and carry those on ships that previously wouldn't have been able to do that. They are also paywalling things like new racing gear, cosmetics, armor sets, weapons, all sorts of different things like this. That, again, if you are willing to spend more money, if you're willing to spend the extra 14 or 5 or $12 here and there, you will just have a better time with the game. And the reason why I and many other people have expressed frustration when companies like Ubisoft have gameplay affecting things for sale, even in single player games, much less like online games that you're playing with other players, is because this gives an incentive to the developer to push you into buying these things for real money. That's why they do it this way. Like, duh. Okay, if they want you to spend money on these armor sets, they're going to make sure the only weapon and armor sets that you can get in the core game itself are lame in comparison, because they want you to feel incentivized to spend money for it. Same with all these, same with the weapon mods, same with the actual ship mods and blades and things. They are finding a reason to force your hand into spending extra money. And they're doing it now with every little bitty thing within Star Citizen. I mean, seriously, it's kind of hard to find like packs. We can look in packs, what these are. These are collections of like cosmetics, ships. The website's broken. Hold on. Okay, that didn't work. Standalone ships. But like, if you want to be competitive in mining, or if you want to go and do races, if you want to just go and like get into dogfights and maybe play more as a pirate, if you want to do any of that stuff, you have to pony up the cash to be competitive. And if you don't, you're just not going to have a good time. And this is why I think for a lot of people, this was the last straw, because they've taken it out of just the ships being the pay to win mechanic. And now it's everything in the game. It's everything. As you can see here, the community is just fed up. Vracks are here, selling performance altering modules and keeping them locked behind a paywall. This paywall, even for a short period, is still the definition of pay to win and not okay. And then another YouTuber, Salt E Mike, said, "This is the most embarrassing thing I've seen this company do yet. What part of this game is not sold on the pledge store? Will there be AI mining and salvage blades next so I can auto play the game while taking screenshots?" Because to be clear, those AI mining blades or salvage blades, if they add those to the game, those just auto control your mining beam if they were to do it that way. So you don't need to even be playing the game while it grinds for you. And I'm sure they'll sell those to you for 15 bucks or 20 bucks. So if you're willing to spend money, you just get to bypass the game itself. You pay more to not play. It's crazy. Isn't that novel? And as you can see, edit, this doesn't even feel like pay to win that much. It is simply prioritizing items on the pledge store that can never be lost. There is your win, probably, and removing any aspect of having to play the game at all. Winning to me is playing and earning stuff that makes my experience different, like a flight blade, or easier, like a component or weapon improvement. This is what is unacceptable to me, which I get. They are literally taking the game itself and then just selling it to you in bits and pieces. So unless you're willing to spend thousands, you don't get the game. And if you go in there and you're like, one of the brokies that spends 45 bucks like me to get the basic startership and try to play the game that way, you're just not going to have as good of a time. You just won't. I know that there's some people that have spent thousands of hours in the game and understand it. And they're like, no, I start with nothing every time they do a server wipe, and I start from the bottom and I grind up and I get the big ship by the end of the run of that instance on the server before they wipe it again. You can have a really good time with it. I get that that's what somebody who's very experienced in the game feels. But as somebody who is new to the game, it's an immediate turnoff to see that if I'm willing to spend more money, I can just bypass the game itself. And it's a turnoff, especially when you're talking about a game that has a lot of player-to-player interactions as well. But I hear you barking, big dog. Luke, dearest Luke, why are they doing this? Why are they all of a sudden getting so greedy? And I know there's kind of two ways to tackle that. One is to say, this is nothing new. They've always been this way, which is probably partially true as well, because they haven't raised $800 million by accident. Okay. They know what they're doing. But the other way is to look at a couple of little bitty tidbits that I think indicate something pretty significant is going on behind the scenes. Little context here. Earlier this year and late last year, it was announced that CIG and Robert Space Industries, the guys making this game, Star Citizen, they had major shakeups within management. They fired some people, moved some other people around. And they put out that like sizzle reel for Squadron 42. And it seems like they are really, really, really trying to get Squadron 42, which is the single player campaign for this, out the door. They really want that to release. And it's like, why are you so insistent all of a sudden after 12 years that this needs to happen right now? It's okay. All of a sudden we've got hustle, but that's all going to tie into this in just a minute. But to also rewind the clocks, you remember the Idris ship. This is the ship that kind of kickstarted a lot of this discussion over the blade systems that would be so useful on a ship this massive because of all the turrets and all the stuff. Using like AI blades would be super useful. Having blades that increase maneuverability would be super, super useful, but they're all locked behind paywalls. All that's super crucial, okay? But there's a point in this video where they're talking about it where something kind of interesting happens, because this ship was not supposed to be released right now. It was supposed to be released next to that Squadron 42 game. And there's a little interesting tidbit I want to play for you from a video that was put together by that one and only Salt E Mike, whose video and rundown on this has helped me make this video. Let me just play it for you, okay?
What's the deal here? I thought we weren't going to release this until Squadron came out.
Good question.
Squadron has developed, and the Idris has been in the PU in various guises for quite some time now. It's been quite clear internally that the two versions are very different things now, and it's...
In my opinion, it's because they ran out of... They've been running out of money. It's because they've been running out of money, and they're going to do whatever possible to keep this thing afloat.
And I think Mike's right. I think Salty Mike is right. I'll have his full video linked in the description box below because it's very good. Gives you a much deeper look at all this because he's way more familiar with the game than I. But I think that this is true. The reason why they are dropping the Idris ship kind of seemingly out of nowhere very suddenly, and why they're all of a sudden getting super, super greedy by monetizing everything in the game itself, is simply because they are running out of money. Even though they've raised $800 million, they are running out of money. And we know this is also starting to happen because they revealed some financials. Granted, these are the financials for 2023, even though they were released on May 2nd of this year. They're staggered by a year. But even with those financials, we can start to see some worrisome trends. And you can go to their website and see this yourself and break it down yourself. We looked at it over on Luke Stevens Live as well, where we did a bit of a deep dive in it. But broad strokes, the primary thing to take away from this is that they are still raising money, true, but they are spending a lot of money and they are burning through a lot of money. Lots of red, okay? Making a game like this is quite expensive, and they have been doing it for over a decade without a full release. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. You can see they also hold a CitizenCon event every year with 3,000 people in Los Angeles where they showcase the game itself and all of that. This goes to explain the 26% increase in our expenditure, including CapEx over 2022 with all the cost categories up. Like, they burn through a lot of cash. Okay, they really, really do. They've increased like marketing spend. They've increased spend on the IT side, on the dev side, all over the place. As you can see here, salaries, publishing and marketing, contracted dev costs, CapEx, G&A, other dev costs, and it's just going up and up and up. And I'm betting you 2024 total expenses are also going to be all the way up even higher than this. And yet the money they're bringing in is not going up that exponentially fast, okay? They are still getting money from the big cash cows, from the big whales, certainly, but not enough to cover these bills, okay? They're hemorrhaging cash right now, and they're trying to find ways to make up for it, which is also why they're trying to get Squadron 42 out the door, because they're hoping they put that out. That maybe makes $300, $400, $500 million. Boom, we got some more cash to finish the persistent universe, and then we can introduce like a subscription model or something like that. We'll see if that works. But they're running out of money. They just are, okay? And at some point, they have to either release a product that makes the money, or they just run out of money and the whole thing shuts down. Like, there's not many ways for this to go. They could potentially try to partner with an outside source, like a Tencent type of person that comes in and just throws money at them to finish the game. But if they do that, they give up all creative control, or at least most of it, a lot of it. And they don't want to do that, because this is also headed up by Chris Roberts. This is headed up by the Roberts in Roberts Space Industries, the company name itself, and he doesn't want to give up control. This is his baby after, 12, 13 years. He doesn't want to give it up. So they are going to try to find some other way to deal with it. But instead of just getting the games out the door and maybe trying to be a little tighter in scope, they are choosing to try and milk their fans for everything they're worth in every single way, even if it fundamentally breaks down the integrity of the game itself, to the point where now Star Citizen, it's not even really a video game. It's just a gigantic flea market of a bunch of different little things. And if you happen to go in there with a big crisp $100 bill and you're willing to just go crazy, you can put together something that you can have fun with. But unless you're willing to do that, you just won't. And it's going to be a turnoff to new players, and it's actively turning off hardcore players who are already invested pretty heavily and are dealing with the sunk cost fallacy, where they don't want to walk away because they've already spent so much money on it. But it's pretty clear, if this continues, if this is the new mindset, there will not be a video game to play at the end of all of this. The version of Star Citizen that will launch will be some sort of bizarro husk of a game and a space sim, and everything else will be paywalled. Everything. And it seems that there is no intention to walk this back. There's no intention to calm down and reevaluate their monetization practices. They've been doing this for a decade, and it's worked. They've raised $800 million, but through mismanagement and their inability to put the game together and get it done, we're now a decade later, and they are closer to launch for sure, but they're also starting to run out of money, because their expenses are growing exponentially faster than their income is growing, and that doesn't work. So they're getting desperate, and that's why you're seeing them release the ship early. You're seeing them put out all these blades and all these different things that, like the weapons and extra cosmetics, everything in the game is for sale now, and they're stomping all over their fans and all the goodwill that they had somehow with the community, and they're doing it because they are freaking desperate for cash. And I don't see this ending well, frankly. I really, really don't. I cannot imagine a world in which you get to stomp all over your own fans and customers and it launches well. Like, I don't see that happening. But maybe they can blow us away. Maybe they walk this back, an hour after this video goes up, they walk it all back, and I get to make a fun pinned comment saying, ignore all of this. But as of right now, this is a mess. This is a disaster. I mean, I'm seeing people that I've spoken with who are really into Star Citizen saying that they're just going to walk away, that they're not interested. And that's crazy. But let me know what you think of all of this in the comment section below. I'm interested to hear your thoughts as gamers, not as people already in deep in the Star Citizen universe. So let me know what you think. Of course, make sure to like the video, subscribe if you enjoyed it and want to see more. But until next time, my friends, much love, hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.
It has been a rough month for Bungie. They are than we In an age where information moves faster than we can scroll, it's easy to miss lots of amazing stories that remind us just how much good is happening around the world. For example, have you heard about how New Zealand has been working tirelessly to save its ecosystems and endangered animals? Or what about the fact that Harvard has decided to make tuition completely free for thousands of students? from breakthroughs in Alzheimer's prevention and cancer detection to an inspiring story about a single man who changed the lives of dozens of homeless people. We're shedding light on the most uplifting news out there. Welcome to Good News. I'm your host Regis, and these are 10 good news stories that will hopefully bring a smile to your face. Our first topic of the day takes us on a trip to South Africa, where the African penguin has been steadily marching towards extinction for decades. In the early 1900s, it was believed that there were over 1 million breeding pairs of these guys. But today, due to food scarcity, climate change, predators, and pollution, fewer than 10,000 remain, putting them on the red list of threatened species of the IUCN. At this rate, experts fear that there won't be enough penguins left in the wild to sustain the species by 2035. But in March of this year, conservationists were finally able to reach a 10-year agreement with the local fishing industry that could change everything. After years of heated debate, no fishing zones have been established around the penguin colonies on Robben Island and Bird Island, with more limitations being introduced around 4 other colonies. That means that sardine and anchovy fishing, the birds' main food sources, will now be banned within 20 kilometers of key nesting sites. While the African penguin continues to battle adversity, this agreement is a source of hope, one that could help ensure that these magnificent birds remain a part of our world for many years to come. Speaking of endangered species, New Zealand has also been doing its best in this field, teaming up with the indigenous Maori people in an attempt to save one of their rarest native birds, the kakariki karaka. You might have heard of the Maori thanks to a recent protest in the New Zealand Parliament that went viral on social media, where lawmakers performed their traditional dance, the haka, a powerful symbol of their strength and unity. That same resilience is shared by the species that they're now trying to save. Endangered species like the kakariki karaka rarely get a second chance, but this isn't the first time that these birds have defied the odds. Also known as Malherbe's parakeet, these little birds have already been declared extinct twice before, once in 1919 and again in 1965. But against all expectations, they were rediscovered in the 1980s. But what was once a common bird all across New Zealand is now considered the rarest mainland bird in the country, with only 450 left in the wild. But thanks to recent conservation efforts, 34 captive-raised parakeets have just been released on Anchor Island in Fiordland National Park, a predator-free sanctuary, where they'll have the chance to rebuild their population. To guarantee their safety, conservationists have set traps and monitoring devices to detect predators, and each bird was color-banded for identification. 9 females were even fitted with radio transmitters to track their movements and breeding success. For the Maori, this is a deeply significant victory, since they consider the kakariki karaka a treasured species, its cultural and spiritual importance even being recognized in their legislation. The goal here is to restore the Malherbe's parakeet population by expanding their knowledge on what precisely is causing the decline of the species. If these efforts succeed, future generations may no longer need to search for these birds in conservation programs. Instead, they might simply look up and see them flying over their heads or resting in the trees where they naturally belong. To wrap up our section on endangered animals, how about one of the cutest and most elusive tiny wildcats on the planet? Meet the rusty spotted cat, a feline so rare and secretive that scientists have struggled to document it in the wild. But thanks to a camera trap in West Bengal, India, Heel managed to capture a clear image of this tiny predator in one of its previously unknown natural habitats. How tiny are we talking about? Well, for reference, the average wildcat, depending on its gender, is anywhere from around 82 to 90 centimeters long, weighing between 9 and 10 kilograms. This wildcat weighs between 800 grams and 1.6 kilograms, measuring between 35 and 48 centimeters, from its whiskers to the tip of its fluffy tail. That makes it the smallest wildcat in the world, according to the Guinness Book of World Records. Rusty spotted cats are found only in 3 countries: India, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, with India providing the largest portion of their habitat. but very little is known about these animals' behavior in the wild. Captive ones are mostly nocturnal, but they're also briefly active during the day. This sighting in West Bengal is significant because it expands the known range of this species in the country, being previously recorded in Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. For such a tiny cat, this discovery is a huge win, bringing us one step closer to understanding and protecting one of the world's most mysterious wildcats. Just don't go petting one. They're actually extremely deadly. On to the medical world. Over in the United Kingdom, the National Health Service is achieving major breakthroughs when it comes to multiple sclerosis treatment. For over 150,000 people in the UK, MS is a daily struggle. This neurological condition affects the brain and the spinal cord, causing pain, fatigue, cognitive difficulties, and mobility loss, severely reducing an individual's quality of life. Until recently, patients with MS had to rely on regular in-person care to manage their symptoms. But that's beginning to change. For the first time in Europe, a tablet treatment is being made widely available for patients to take at home. Its name is cladribine, and until now, it was only available for the most severe cases. With the latest approval from the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, however, thousands more can now access it. And the best part? It only requires 20 total days of treatment, spread over 4 years, a much more convenient alternative when compared to most other MS therapies. The results so far have been nothing short of incredible, with studies showing that 8 out of 10 patients experienced 0 relapses. It's also great news for patients looking to start a family, since it's safe to get pregnant 6 months after the treatment ends, making it a lot less restrictive than other options. And beyond helping patients, this might also alleviate the already overworked NHS. By reducing the patient's hospital visits, British clinicians can dedicate more time and attention to other cases, boosting NHS productivity, staff's well-being, and patient care as a whole. This development is great news, as it means more freedom for patients, a more efficient healthcare system, and a real step forward when it comes to MS treatment. But that's not the only breakthrough in the medical field. Cancer detection has also seen a major improvement recently. Do you remember our video on the biggest technological innovations of 2024? In that one, we covered how AI has become an amazing tool for doctors. But now, scientists have taken it even further, developing an AI model that achieves a nearly 100% accuracy rate for endometrial cancer detection. The model was developed by an international team of researchers, a tool designed to analyze and enhance microscopic images of cells and tissue to detect early cancer stages that often go unnoticed by the human eye. And the results? An incredible 99.26% accuracy rate. To put that into perspective, traditional human methods range between 79 and 81% accuracy. This kind of precision could literally be the difference between life and death. By spotting cancer earlier, doctors can intervene sooner, leading to higher survival rates and better patient outcomes. Even better, researchers believe this AI can be adapted to detect other types of cancers, potentially revolutionizing diagnosis across multiple fields of medicine. Many of you have expressed very valid concerns regarding AI in the comments of our videos, and the team behind this model understands this too. They've emphasized that this AI is designed to assist doctors, not replace them. Ethical debates around artificial intelligence are crucial, and they should continue. But one thing is undeniable. This technology could potentially save a lot of lives. Speaking of life-saving innovations, a discontinued Swiss drug might be the answer we've been looking for to help prevent Alzheimer's disease. More than 6 million Americans at the age of 65 and older live with Alzheimer's, and for many, there's no way to stop it once symptoms start. But what if we could delay the symptoms and give those at risk more time? That's exactly what a study led by Washington University is working to achieve. 22 individuals with inherited Alzheimer's genes received a drug called gantenerumab, while the remaining subjects in the trial took another drug or placebo for comparison. The results? Their risk of developing early Alzheimer's dropped from 100% to 50%. While a 50-50 chance of getting Alzheimer's might not sound like an ultimate victory, for those who were destined to develop the disease no matter what, it's a fighting chance at the very least, one they didn't have before. Now, extended trials are testing lecanemab, a newer FDA-approved treatment designed to slow the disease's progression for those already showing symptoms. What this study proves is that Alzheimer's can at least be delayed. And for those guaranteed to develop symptoms, that could mean that they'll get to enjoy a few more healthy years with the people they love. Now, let's head back to campus for this next one, since education is about to become a lot more affordable. Getting into Harvard University is tough enough, but the real challenge for many students who make the cut is being able to afford it. Well, that is about to change. Starting next year, Harvard will offer free tuition to any family that makes less than $200,000 per year. And for those making under $100,000, the university will cover everything. We're talking tuition, housing, food, health insurance, even travel costs. This is pretty incredible, since tuition alone is around $56,650 per year. And when you factor in housing and other essentials, that number increases to over $82,850 every year. Thanks to this initiative, however, 86% of United States families will qualify for free tuition. For countless students, it means the difference between attending their dream school or giving up entirely. Harvard has shaped leaders for centuries, and now gifted students from lower income backgrounds can get the education they deserve without the fear of lifelong debt. Changes like these, big or small, remind us that the world is moving in the right direction, despite everything else going on. And if you enjoy stories like these, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We'd really appreciate it, and it helps us to make more videos just like this. While Harvard is revolutionizing access to education, a millionaire in Canada is doing the same for housing. Meet Marcel Lebrun, a tech entrepreneur and former CEO who sold his company back in 2011. But instead of spending his fortune on yachts and private islands, he decided to give back by building 99 tiny homes for his homeless neighbors in Fredericton, New Brunswick.
And really, what we're doing here isn't just building a little community, but we're building community in our city. Like, how do we help our city be better?
Grateful for the opportunities life has given him, Lebrun felt a responsibility to give back. That's how 12 Neighbors was born. A community that focuses on a lot more than just housing. He didn't just donate money, he put in the work, traveling across the United States, Canada, and even Ghana to study solutions that actually work. The answer? Communities that provide stability, dignity, and support while still respecting people's independence. Residents of 12 Neighbors have access to substance abuse recovery, counseling, employment opportunities, healthcare services, and much more.
I remember 30 years ago that the government promised homelessness was going to end in 10 years. Well, here we are 30 years later, and Marcel here has done more than the government has. He's done it in a year.
Each 22 square meter house includes a living room that doubles as a bedroom, a fully equipped kitchen, and a 3-piece bathroom. They even have solar panels and front porches where people can gather to socialize. And as if that wasn't enough, Lebrun also built a social enterprise center at the heart of the village, complete with a cafe, retail shops, workshops, and community gardens, all designed to help residents not just survive, but thrive. Unlike most housing programs, here rent is based on income, meaning that residents will pay just 30% of what they earn, with internet and utilities already included. Thanks to one man's vision, dozens of people are now off the streets, in a warm home, and on a path to a better future. While Lebrun works to provide shelter for those in need, scientists may have discovered huge reserves of naturally occurring hydrogen gas trapped beneath the mountain ranges of our planet. If confirmed, this could mean access to a massive untapped source of clean energy, one that's been forming beneath our feet for millions of years. Hydrogen in general is already considered one of the best clean energy alternatives. The problem is that producing hydrogen artificially is expensive and often releases greenhouse gases, which kind of defeats the purpose. So finding large natural reserves would be a major step forward for clean energy technology. Researchers are already planning to search for hydrogen in the Pyrenees, the European Alps, and the Balkans. And while we don't yet know exactly how much hydrogen is hidden away, previous research in the Pyrenees suggests that it could be enough to power 500,000 people annually. There's still a long way to go, but experts are extremely optimistic about it. If all goes according to plan, we could be witnessing the birth of a new natural hydrogen industry. For our final story, we're returning once again to New Zealand, where nature is getting a second chance. In its most ambitious restoration effort yet, the country is set to re-wild 3 of its major islands, helping to reverse centuries of environmental damage. This initiative is part of the Island Ocean Connection Challenge, or IOCC for short. It's a global movement dedicated to restoring 40 critical ecosystems by 2030. By adding Auckland Island, Stewart Island, and Chatham Island, New Zealand is taking a giant step when it comes to reversing centuries of environmental damage. Auckland Island alone hosts over 500 native species, including the endangered Gibson's albatross, New Zealand sea lion, and the yellow-eyed penguin. But invasive animals like mice and feral cats have already driven 32 native birds to extinction. Stewart Island, as the third largest island in New Zealand, will be cleared as well, with plans made to repopulate it with endangered species like the owl parrot. Chatham Island also faces similar issues, with over 300 at-risk plant and animal species, and it's currently overrun by invasive species, causing a lot of damage to its ecosystem. To achieve all of this, the initiative has enlisted specialists who will spend years carefully sweeping these islands, using conservation dogs, camera monitoring networks, tracking tunnels, and traps, all to ensure that one day these islands are completely pest-free. The New Zealand government has already invested $54 million of the $202 million needed for the project, while the New Zealand Nature Fund continues its fundraising efforts to cover the rest. With each island restored, New Zealand moves closer to reclaiming its natural heritage, proving that nothing is lost forever. And that's a wrap on today's good news. We hope these stories of kindness and hope were enough to make you smile. It's easy to get overwhelmed by the negativity of daily news, but moments like these remind us that science is advancing, people are making a difference, and change is possible. Which of our stories today inspired you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
What is it about AI that makes it difficult for game development? You hear all these stories in the news about AI learning to play StarCraft, Dota 2, Overcooked, Doom, Street Fighter, Rocket League and more. But yet when you boot up the latest and greatest on your chosen platform, non-player characters and other opponents don't seem to be anywhere near as smart. So what gives? I'm Tommy Thompson and welcome to AI 101 here on AI in Games. And in this video we're going to unpack this question: what is it about games that makes it difficult for AI? Despite having made over 100 videos on the subject of AI for video games, this is an issue I've never succinctly described, but it's increasingly one that needs to be addressed. If a team of researchers can train an AI to play your favourite AAA title, while the built-in AI for regular play is nowhere near as complex, what gives? It's understandably a question people will ask. For this video, I am focusing solely on the challenge of a games programmer trying to make compelling AI, rather than the challenge of a researcher or hobbyist trying to train an AI to play a game. These are two distinctly different problems, and I can dedicate a separate video to the latter of the two, if you wish. With that in mind, it's important to distinguish between these two things. An AI that learns to play a game operates in a very different capacity from one that is programmed to be part of a game you're playing. If we consider, for example, StarCraft 2, where Google DeepMind trained the AlphaStar bot to become a Grandmaster, this is a machine learning AI that is trained outside of the game itself. It spends weeks learning to become the very best player, costing millions of dollars to produce, and relying on data recorded of top-tier humans that it learned from. Once trained, it can make decisions very quickly, given it already knows how to respond to those scenarios being presented to it. In addition, it isn't part of the game itself. It's an external program making decisions that then pass in input actions to the game, much like a human player would. Meanwhile, the AI built into the game is created by a team of programmers and designers during the development process. It has to accommodate for varying skill levels, address the needs of designers who want the AI to operate in a specific way, and also is at the mercy of the game's resources. AI has to operate alongside core game logic, rendering, input management, online connectivity, and much more besides. Plus, as we've seen throughout the dozens of episodes I've made over the years, the types of AI techniques used in games are more often than not quite different from those you're seeing in the news. The likes of AlphaStar and the OpenAI 5 are machine learning systems that are trained on vast server farms, and generative AI tools like DALL-E and GPT still need to run on those servers after training, given their size and complexity. Whereas non-player characters and enemy AI in games typically use what is known as symbolic AI, where the system looks at all the possible configurations of the world and determines which configuration it should reach by searching for a path towards it, and it does so at runtime on your PC, console, or even mobile device. There are exceptions to this, of course, but there are also reasons for why this is often adopted in a video game, which we'll unpack later. Now, to really get into the meat of the topic, we're going to discuss some core AI principles that should get those brain juices pumping. For those of you without a background in computer science or AI, we're going to talk some theoretical fundamentals, basic terminology that anyone who has studied the field will be familiar with, and it's how we can begin to define the challenges presented by different games from the perspective of a developer. Perhaps the most critical element to understand is the notion of a state, a snapshot of a problem which the AI is trying to solve. In a game, this can range from the position of relevant items in strategy games between turns, to the position and activities of all enemies in the current frame of a first-person shooter. It's important to only capture the relevant information of the current state, rather than fill it up with unnecessary info, given every possible unique value that can exist will influence the number of unique states that can occur. Knowing how many pixels are rendered in the health UI is far less useful than simply knowing how much health the player has as a number. Based on the current state, an AI can then make an action, the idea being that the action will change the state in some way. The easiest way to understand this is the movement of a piece in a board game. The action taken is one that is permissible by the game state, and in doing so it often, but not always, will lead to a new state. This is known as a state transition system or function. The idea that actions will change the world provided we pick good ones in key moments. Understanding the number of possible states, the number of actions and how they interlink is a big issue for any AI problem, be it for in-game behavior or for training bots. This web of states connected by actions is known as a state space. A symbolic AI system needs to be able to search the state space for good collections of actions to execute in sequence, while a machine learning system needs to learn what actions make the most sense in a given state, often by measuring the value of an action either in its immediate future, because you killed an enemy, or 10 minutes from now, given you put enough good actions together to win the game. But the relationship between states and actions can become increasingly fraught, and make it difficult for a game developer or researcher to approach the problem. For one, the sheer amount of states can be an issue. A small and simple puzzle game may only have hundreds or thousands of unique states, but for many a contemporary video game, when you consider the number of unique situations that can exist, it quickly moves into the millions, if not billions. In fact, as discussed in a previous episode, it's estimated that StarCraft has 2 × 10 to the power of 1,685 unique states. That's a 2 with 1,685 zeros after it. But to make matters worse is notions of determinism and observability. Determinism is essentially whether there is any random chance at play in the game. This can mean we can't guarantee based on a given state whether an action will execute as intended, or can predict the behavior of AI characters. It's what made Ms. Pac-Man a much more complex game for players when compared to the 1980 original, given now the ghosts can opt to move randomly. And way back in the early days of AI in games, I discussed why this led to an entire body of AI research back in the early 2000s. Plus, all of this relies on the idea that we know for sure the current state of the game. If you consider a strategy game or a card game, you typically don't know the entire state, only what is directly in front of you. So the system has to make a judgment based on limited knowledge, or guess what state it's currently in, which can be equally problematic, given many different states can look very similar on first passing. Now, this is but the tip of the iceberg for a myriad of technical aspects of AI, but from here we have enough of a grasp to begin to understand why, as a video game developer, building AI can prove a challenge. It's important to state that, from the top, the resulting system that makes decisions needs to be fast, and depending on the genre, that speed can often be in but mere milliseconds. An enemy in a first-person shooter needs to come up with an action that makes sense now, not spend 3 seconds thinking about it. Otherwise, by the time it comes up with a super intelligent solution to the problem, the situation has changed so drastically, the solution is largely useless. Plus, if it did spend 3 seconds thinking about it, it would probably cause the game's performance to stutter. While we're long past the days of the PS3 and Xbox 360, where games like Spec Ops: The Line had strict limits of only 8 active AI at once, the performance budgets for AI characters haven't improved drastically in the years since, largely because of all the flashy graphics, but that's an issue for another time. To maintain good performance, in games it's common for both the problem space to be rapidly reduced, but the mechanisms to come up with solutions become much more truncated. Systems like finite state machines and behavior trees, which we've covered in previous episodes, solve this problem in 2 distinct ways. First, they ensure that logic for possible actions is tighter and more explicit. It reduces the process of finding and selecting the correct action to a series of conditions that will guarantee their execution. This is useful for a game designer, given you know why an AI is going to behave in the way that it does, and can account for a variety of circumstances. But that in turn robs the AI of more intelligent or interesting decisions it could possibly make. Alternative solutions, such as planning systems like in Fear, help to resolve this. Goal-oriented action planning uses a description language to allow the AI to search for good combinations of actions to create plans of attack. But even then, this is tightly constrained, with most plans in Fear only being a handful of actions in length, and even then, it has to reassess whether that plan is valid as it executes it, given the plan to jump through a window might no longer make sense because the player is now standing in the way. Plus, we haven't factored in things like what information about the state of the game each AI should know, what goals should they have, whether those goals change, where in the game world can they move, how do you differentiate between valid options. This latter point is a concept I explored in my AI 101 episode on utility AI, which often helps solve this problem. All of this highlights the problems that exist for creating non-player characters in games. If the optimal decision was made for every character, would make games less performant and often result in sluggish behavior, which is not ideal for what is meant to be an interactive medium. While many of the games mentioned thus far in this video are older and subject to stricter system limitations, these problems still persist today. Games are increasingly more complex environments as the technology continues to make significant gains, and that makes it all that much harder to maintain the illusion of intelligence across the entirety of a gameplay experience. This is why we often see concessions being made. AI that cheats and has access to knowledge it shouldn't in the likes of a strategy or horror game makes sense because it allows for it to make decisions that fit the spirit of the game more effectively than trying to operate without it. AI characters that fake collaboration in the heat of the moment is more practical than trying to get 2 separate AI systems to work together to figure out a good strategy. Or even trying to anticipate the player's actions can be a nightmare, given players are unreliable and prone to changing up playstyles or approaches as situations unfold, so we may cheat and read information directly from the player to help us out. In each of these cases, it's more important to ensure the experience is fun, rather than the AI be exceedingly intelligent, because at the end of the day, players don't want something that is as intelligent as it could be, because AI in a game that operates at the peak of its faculties isn't fun to play against for 99.9% of the audience. You want something interesting and fallible, and that's a challenge in and of itself. Now, you might have listened to all this and then thought, well, that's because we're still using older AI techniques, state machines, utility functions, planning algorithms. I already mentioned the use of machine learning and deep learning. Why isn't that just used all of the time? With machine learning, it's really a chicken and egg problem. You need the game to be ready in order for the ML system to learn how to play within the rules you've set. The machine learning algorithm will then create the final trained system, often referred to as a policy, which will know what to do for each state in the game it encounters. But if the game is changed, then it could have an impact on the quality of the policy, and so you need to train it again. This doesn't really work for a game that is in development, given you're often fixing bugs, making adjustments, or finalizing and adding content at various stages of the development timeline. Any one of these can lead to the policy having to be retrained. This is what makes big success stories like AlphaStar and the OpenAI 5 very misleading, given those systems were trained years after the game came out, based on a large amount of existing replay data that can only be generated by an online community playing the game regularly after launch. But even then, it suffers from the same limitations, given you'll have noticed that neither of these systems have ever reappeared in their respective games. The reason for that? The games get patched with balance changes, and more often than not in games such as StarCraft and Dota, it means that the train policies drop in quality significantly as a result of changes to the meta, only it's much harder and more expensive for them to readjust to those changes compared to a regular player. This isn't to say it's impossible to use ML for enemy AI, but you'll notice from many of the examples I've listed over the years on AI in games, such as Forza and Gran Turismo, they tend to be in complex but tightly defined problem spaces. In fact, racing games are a fantastic place to experiment with them. However, as discussed in a previous episode of AI 101, we tend to find more use for machine learning in other areas of game development. For more on that, be sure to check out that video. This episode of AI 101 has been about highlighting why AI is a real challenge in the context of game development. Naturally, I can't cover the whole subject in one readily accessible YouTube video, but hopefully you get the idea. And of course, to all you game devs out there, get in the comments and share the problems you've experienced over the years. I'm sure that will be enlightening for many who have never tried this out themselves. Meanwhile, in some future episodes of AI 101, I will dig deeper into specific genres, explore why they're difficult to build AI for them, as well as common approaches that are taken by developers to make AI for them. Plus, I'll also unpack the challenges for researchers in training AI to play games as well. Be sure to leave a comment on what genres you would like to see me tackle in a future video. On that note, I want to thank our production team on the AI in Games Patreon who suggested this topic. The production team are my top crowdfunding supporters, and every month we have meetings where I talk about everything in the pipeline, but also get critical feedback and suggestions from the team that we then discuss in more detail. It was the production team's idea not only for this episode, but also for the future videos digging into specific genres. And together we've ironed it out into what you're seeing now. To have your say in how AI in games moves forward and participate in our production meetings, visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/AI in games. And with that, that's us for this episode of AI 101. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something new and enjoyed your time along the way. Stay safe, have fun, and I'll be back.
Demons, and we even have the icon of sin. Let's get started. Alright, let's take a look at the most important character in Doom, the Doomslayer. And here I have with the base Predator suit, and I think it looks fantastic. We're not in the engine, of course, so we don't have all the knickknacks and things that you usually have with the shaders that come with a game like this. But, so you can see him with his textures around, all the detail he has. We're going to look at geometry, UVs in a second. One of the things about this character is he is several parts. He's not just one single part, and each part has one material. So again, from all the variations that we've seen in this channel about the game AAA game models, you can see that there's all kinds of things that you can choose from. You can have one single welded mesh with several materials, or you can have several meshes, each mesh with its own material. Of course, these are usually joined by one single rig. All right, so you can see there's a lot here that is very, very good when it comes to looping things around. And for the most part, what I see in this character is, aside from the stylization, because characters in Doom, like whether you demons and humans, they're stylized. They look realistic texture wise, but proportion wise they're very stylized. Nobody is as big as this guy. So just looking at different pieces, let's just isolate one. That this isn't a welded mesh. So the mesh has thickness in some parts of the armor. Usually, I don't think I've explained this yet. So the way that you go about doing something like this, and oh, would you look at that? It's welded over here, but it's not welded in the arms or in the lower part. The way you do these kind of model, like these topology that you have here, is you have the high poly. So the high poly, usually something like this, even though it's hard surface, it's most likely sculpted in ZBrush, probably little bits and pieces modeled in the DCC app like Maya or Blender. I'd say most likely ZBrush. That's usually what you use when you're dealing with your high poly model. Then when you get into the low poly, which is the in-game mesh, this is when you get very technical, because as you can see here, you got to figure out how the loops are going to go to hold that bait, because that is all you are worried here. Just trying to hold that bait, because let me, before we continue, this whole thing is 188,000 triangles. I think we're starting to see a pattern with AAA games in the sense that probably 100,000, it's not damaging at all when it comes to performance. Usually for the game like this, you'd have the Doomslayer and you have several characters all around, like all the demons coming at you all the time with all the VFX and stuff. So there is enough budget for you to make a character that is around this range. You can see that these little ridges right here, there are modeled. These are details that I would have thought they would be normal maps, but they're not. They're geometry. So this is a couple of things to take into account. One of the interesting things that we see here is, again, what I keep saying. If a surface is not deforming, do not worry about triangles that much. It doesn't mean that you're going to have stars all over the place, of course. But you don't have to worry about having triangles so much, because look at the geometry here. Could this have been a quad? Maybe. Wasn't necessarily. Absolutely not. Because this, like the chest plate's never going to deform. The chest plate is just one single piece. That being said, it's one single piece, but you can see that the loops have a very nice flow. And everything here has a very nice flow to it. Let's look at the helmet. The helmet's very interesting because this helmet has an inside. So as you can see, this thing it has geometry on the inside, because let's go into the texture mode. You can see that it has maps on the inside when he grabs his helmets and put it on, because you're going to see the inside. That being said, this is quite a bit of geometry for the inside of the helmet, but you still see some normal maps. So you can see that this big polygon right here, it has this very nice detail that is baked down. That is just normal maps. Same for these details over here. I'm not turning around because I have the lighting in a certain position. But I just want to show you the inside of the helmet, and you can appreciate all of the materials that it has with the normal maps and everything. And we'll talk a little bit further in the UVs. So yeah, the geometry on the inside, it's quite high for a place where the player's not usually gonna see it. Now, when we go into the helmet, you can see that the helmet has a lot of features, and a lot of these features are modeled. You cannot get away with normal maps when it comes to vents. Some games do it, but for today, for current gen, because next gen doesn't exist yet. For current gen, you have to model these because it's something that has depth, and when your player sees it, if it doesn't have geometry, it's going to be very apparent that it's like a normal map with the pictures stuck there. So it doesn't look good. This is one of the places where you have to take care of, where is my player going to see depth here? Sometimes the normal maps will not do it. So same thing with these ridges right here. Pretty sure that because the budget on this, look, just the helmet is 24,000. That's quite a bit just for the helmet. But still, you have good flow and good loops going all around the area. All right, so this is the weapon. We already seen weapons. This is exactly the same that we saw on the other video, so I'm not gonna look at that. But his body, there's no body underneath the armor. So as you can see, the arms are completely open. These aren't welded meshes. Although now that I see it, let's look at this arm and see the separation between this and the glove. You can see that the glove is, yeah, the glove is open, or the gauntlet, however you want to call it. The fingers follow the usual loop that we've been seeing so far on most characters, where you have some nice loops in between your fingers, and when you get to the joint, this is where you spend a little bit more geometry. Of course, he has those extra kind of like knuckles or something, but he does have a little bit of extra area in here for more detail due to the armor. I think this gauntlet looks fantastic. All right, so let's see. The legs are one single piece. As you can see, you can just see underneath. It's like a suit, which is very interesting. It's like a suit that you can get into, and you can see that everything is just one piece. I'm trying to see if there are some things that are separated. So let's see. Okay, you got this part, and it's an open mesh, just with a little bit of thickness because it's on top of other things. So, but look, it has these features modeled as opposed to not modeled, which is, I think, very interesting. All right, let's look at the UVs. All right, here we are, the UVs for the torso. As you can see, very nice and very well laid out. They do have an order, and no pieces are outside, even though I would say this suit is symmetrical. So maybe some pieces could have been taken out and to save real estate. You don't have to do that all the time. It depends on your art direction. But you can see that everything is well laid out and everything is packed, because some people have asked me, like, why is this UV like rotated like this as opposed to being completely straight? Sometimes when you're packing UVs, and I don't think this, well, to me, this doesn't look like it was auto packed. I think this was packed intentionally. Usually when you have things like this, you just gotta fit things in a way that you can take advantage of the most real estate from your 0-1 space. So that's why some things are rotated. Because for instance, if you see this part right here, if it wasn't rotated and if you put it straight, it would occupy more space and this piece right here would not fit. So that's why sometimes when you put UVs here, you have to figure out, it's kind of like playing puzzles. You just playing puzzles and try to fit your parts as best as you can so you can take advantage of the most real estate. One thing that's very important is always have a little bit of a gap, which is the famous padding that you see in Substance Painter. Always leave a little bit of a gap so that there's a little bit of bleed between the textures and there's no artifacts, especially when you're baking. If your UVs are like super close, like 1 pixel of difference, you're going to have trouble when you're baking. So now that we're here looking at the texture, one of the things that always caught my attention, and one of the things that I think makes Doom stand out visually, is the fact that, well, what you're seeing right here, the textures, even though this game has a realistic-ish art style, because it's not cartoony, I wouldn't call this game cartoony, it is stylized, but you can see that their textures have a little bit of vibrancy to their colors. So you can see that even though this is an armor that has been worn out, and when you get it in engine, you have all the correct shaders, you can see all that, but just the diffuse, you can see that there are colors that really pop. There are colors that call your attention. And this is one of the things that I really like about the textures of the characters in Doom, because we're going to see it on Demons as well. I like it. So what do you think? Do you like this kind of texturing better? Do you like the more nitty-gritty, realistic, kind of like photo scan textures? Or do you like a little bit of more cartoony texture? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'd like to see what people think about that. All right, in here you can see that you got your arm on this side, huge arm by the way. And then you got your fingers. The fingers always, when they're unwrapped, they're pretty funny looking. And you can see that this is, we've seen some characters that look like this, where they actually split the hand around the pinky area and just like open it and pelt it. The other stuff that I find interesting is all the bits and pieces that are very small, even though they're modeled, they're broken apart. And you can see them, like these parts right here are outside, which is something that you can do. Your bags are going to be just fine, especially with software nowadays like Substance Painter where you can paint on 3D. The bags are going to be just fine when you do this kind of stuff. And yeah, you can see all the detail that is done around here. Very cool. I really like the textures for this game. All right, let's look at the helmet. And once again, the way that the helmet is unwrapped is very particular. All the detail, like all the little bits and pieces from the inside and the outside of the helmet, you can see that they're laid around. And you can see that in order to utilize the most real estate from 0 to 1 space, you don't have your helmet unwrapped like straight like a mask. You have it angled because you have more real estate in this part as opposed to just going straight like this. All right, so I think that's for the Doomslayer. Let's look at some demons. All right, and here we are, the Arachnotron. I think this is a fan favorite. People like this demon, and it shows up very often in the game. And you can see how cool it looks like in between the fleshy parts and the mechanical parts, because most demons have some cybernetics on them. And yeah, I think this is pretty cool. Also look at the textures, just what I've been talking about with when we were looking at the Doomslayer. The diffuse map, because this doesn't have any roughness or any metalness or anything, the diffuse map is really colorful and it pops. So in an environment as chaotic as the Doom environment, is very important for your player to be able to tell what's what. You usually can do that with the readability and the overall silhouette of the character. We'll talk about that in another video, so make sure you subscribe, by the way. But another way to do it is with textures. So textures is a pretty cool way to do it. I just love the way that these textures are made. All right, you can see that this demon is not as high as the Doomslayer. 59,000 polygons, which is not bad. So this tells you a little bit of the difference between the polygons between the main character and the enemies, because enemies you'll have more than one. But still, 59, 60 for an enemy, it's quite a bit. There's quite a bit that you can do with the character with that amount of polygons. You got good hard surface here. Let's grab this part of the head, isolated. So as you can see, open mesh, easier to rig, but it has a mouth bag. So we've talked about mouth bags in previous games, and this thing has a tongue too. I mentioned in the previous game that this was the throat. It's not. This is usually the tongue. So you can see that this mesh right here, and it's going to flip if we go to edit mode. But if we grab this and we go all the way back here, you can see that part sticking out that looks like it's the throat. It's not the throat, it's the tongue usually. Because the tongue usually goes a little bit further back, just especially on a character like this, just so you can use the bones to extrude it and do all kinds of nasty movements in the case of this character. But you do have a mouth back because you can see in the inside of the mouth. One thing that is very interesting to me is usually when you model characters, you model them with the mouth closed. Like all the characters that we've seen here usually don't have their mouths open. That's something that you do after rigging. I wonder why is it done this way, especially with demons. If you know, let me know in the comment sections down below. I know there's some developers sometimes, for some reason, these videos have gotten to the people who make these things. So if you made this, just let me know why this was modeled with the open mouth as opposed to the mouth being closed like most characters. So one of the things that is interesting about these is, even though these are round surfaces, they're not, they didn't give them that many polygons. And we've been seeing that sometimes in environment pieces, when there's a round surfaces, usually has a ton of geometry. This one doesn't have much geometry, and you can actually see the jagged edges all around this, which you didn't see on the Slayer. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. This is just something that is decided when you're making a character. Not all characters are created equal. I'm just pointing out the differences, so you can see the patterns and maybe you can relate with your own art or with your own game. As you can see, the purpose of this model is so that it gets destroyed. So the inside pieces, even though they are covered, they're all modeled and textured and had a ton of detail, because you are, as a player, going to see underneath, and you're just not going to see like an ugly square just hanging in there. So that's why certain bits and pieces are modeled, even though they're obscured by other things. We're going to see this is more apparent with the icon of sin. But let's look at the UVs for this character. All right, so we're looking at the head, and you can see that just like the other UVs, trying to take advantage of the most real estate they can. And the way I'm tilting my head because this thing is like this, and it kind of looks like a butterfly, which is very funny. So you can see exactly here where the seam is located at, and it goes this way, which again, that seam is hidden by this part right here. So creative way of hiding your seams is use the other pieces of your character. If your character has something on top of that, just like the hair on human characters, there's a piece right here that's covering this seam. So that seam's never going to be seen by the player. And you can see that this has a lot of detail that is baked into it as normal maps. One of the things that when I was teaching in college, that students would ask me is if there was a problem when baking, if your bakes will be on top of an edge or on top of a vertice. As you can see here, it's not a big deal. You don't have to have a detail on a bare polygon like on the face for it to bake well. You can have it on edges, you can have it on vertices, it doesn't matter. It's as long as it follows the silhouette and it wraps the model with enough geometry. It doesn't matter where you place your detail, whether it's on top of vertice or in between some edges, it's still going to bake fine. All right, so let's look at our final character. It's gonna be the icon of sin. All right, so I haven't repositioned the camera in the viewport just so you can see how massive this character is. And another thing before we get into the icon of sin, this is actually a character that somebody requested in the comment section. So let me know what you like to see on the videos. I like to read all your comments and see what people liked. I want to give my audience the content that they want to see. So let me know what you want to see. It might just be on the next video. Okay, so just like I mentioned in the Arachnotron, the deal with some of the demons, well, I guess most of them, in fact, they have bits and pieces that fall off, especially the icon of sin, because the icon of sin has several stages. So one of the interesting things about this model is how the pieces of this character, because this has several stages, it's just a different piece. Everything is just a different piece. You can see that if I delete it, it goes away, but you can see underneath. So this is very interesting about these characters here. And yeah, I just want to show you, like, you can see underneath. If I hide it, you can see, especially in the fingers, like the more that you damage it, the more that you can see through it. So that's very interesting about these characters. I'm guessing, you know, as you destroy it, is mesh that goes away, and that is what you get. One of the things about the icon of sin that's very interesting is look at that many triangles. Almost 260,000 triangles. I've deleted some little bits here and there because I don't want YouTube demonetizing this video because of gore. So, because that's how the mesh is called, those parts are called gore. And I don't want YouTube to do anything to the video. The channel just got monetized. Thank you so much, everybody who've been supporting, sharing, liking, and all that. Just got monetized a couple weeks ago, so I'm just hiding certain bits and pieces that I know YouTube's not gonna like. But overall, this character's huge in terms of not only size, but the amount of polygons. And just like we've discussed, the reason for this is because this is a big character. If it's a big character and it gets close to your player, and it's just normal maps, your player's gonna see it. Alright, here wireframes, so you can look at the geometry and you can see how dense this guy is. And there are things underneath, because like I said, and we actually can take it out. So the fingers is one of the things that's the most destructible about this character. So you can see that we can take it out all the way to the bone. And there is still some very dense geometry underneath. So that's why this character is so heavy polygon wise, but still you can see that this little detail from his armor. So yeah, you can see like the geometry of this thing is fantastic. And I say fantastic because look at all the little bits and pieces that go here. Even if we get closer, you can see that this little detail, although it's not that little because this thing is monstrous, it's, you know, everything is modeled. It's not just normal maps. And it also has to hold well when baking, because if your high poly has these ridges and you don't bake it, you can get some artifacts if you make it flat, or it's just going to look horrible. All right, let's look at some UVs. Okay, this thing has a ton of materials because it has so many pieces. Let's look at one side of the torso and see how the UVs go about. You can see this is this whole part of the torso, and it's just one half. So the other half is another texture piece. And this is something when you are optimizing, a lot of people relate optimizing to reducing. So it means when you talk about optimizing, people think it's just you're taking things out and you're reducing to its lowest common denominator. Sometimes optimizing means what is best for the engine, what is best for the player. So you're not so worried about, okay, I'm going to have so many draw calls because each one has a normal map, each one has probably a roughness map, each one has a diffuse map. In this case, you are focusing on the player experience. And also when you're dealing with the icon of sin, you don't have as many characters on screen. So as always, I know this answer sucks for some people, but whenever you are creating and deciding what you're going to do, it all depends on what is the purpose of that piece. And just so you can have some nightmare fuel, these are the UVs of the head. Oh my god, this looks horrific. But that's the purpose. One thing that I'll say, this looks more horrific than the whole thing put together, because wow, if this face looks to me at night, yeah, I don't want to. And because the head is out over here, now you can see how this looks. Yeah, this is pretty scary. This is a very interesting unwrap because it's one of those few instances where if I show you this image, you can totally read what it is. So it's very, very interesting. If I take this out, you can see the whole armature on top. Kind of looks like General Grievous right now, but with the UVs, it looks scarier. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to this point. Remember to leave a like, leave a comment for the YouTube algorithm. What other games would you like to see next? Leave it in the comment section down below. My socials are in the description. You can follow me on X and make sure you're subscribed so you can see all my posts in the community tab. And I'll see you in the next one.
Please deal with the most insufferable
I keep forgetting about this. Frankly, I just do. I don't know what's wrong with me, but this is coming out May 30th and I keep spacing it. But it's coming soon, like 2 weeks from now. And there seems to be a pretty dedicated group of people that are excited for it. Even the IGN video that was posted 2 days ago is still getting like 190,000 views. Pretty solid. There is interest. There are people checking it out. This particular thing I want to watch is how Limveld will change from run to run. And it'll give us a little breakdown of how they anticipate doing this. But like quick recap for me, just so you know where I'm at. I played the alpha thing that they did, or the beta. I don't remember which they said it was, but I played the playtest when they did it recently. And just transparently for me, I didn't like it. I just didn't. Everything I love about Elden Ring has been taken out, and all this stuff I didn't really love about Elden Ring has been doubled down on. And then other things like copy and pasted enemies and bosses, I'm just not super stoked about that. Like what I love about FromSoft games typically is the sense of exploration. Not really a thing here because that's not what kind of game it is. The build crafting, not really a thing here because it's a roguelite and they have predetermined set paths for progression for each character. So that's just not a thing. I love discovering new bosses and new challenges. With this, there's a set number of bosses and it's not that many. And it's based around these runs that you're going on to try and defeat them with your party. And so you're going to be dealing with the same enemies over and over and over again. To me, that's like every time I try to look for something that this game is doing that's unique or fun or cool, I just fail to find it. And instead I find other things that they've stripped out of the experience that I liked elsewhere. So that means it's just not a game for me, which is okay. Not every game has to be for you. This is just not for me. Okay, but I do keep hoping to see something that gets me excited about it some more. And that's where this video comes in because they're going to describe how Limveld will change from run to run. And maybe this is going to be exciting enough that maybe it introduces that thing I like, which is the sense of exploration. Maybe there's going to be something here that's added that can make it more exciting. Let's see.
One of the biggest questions left over after Elden Ring Nightreign's network test back in February was, how will the world of Limveld change in the real game? After all, Nightreign is, for all intents and purposes, a roguelite, and one of the core elements of any roguelite is a degree of randomness or procedural generation that ensures that every run feels just a little bit different. Nightreign has that in the loot department, with every run giving you different rewards and forcing you to cobble together a build based on what you're able to find within that run, and also in the enemy and boss department, since none of the boss encounters are static, with the sole exception of the Nightlord battle on day 3. But as far as the world of Limveld, we never really got a chance to see how it changes from run to run during the network test. During my 2 days of playtime at FromSoft's office and over the course of about 10 full runs, I got my answer to that earlier question. Here's how Limveld will change from run to run in Elden Ring Nightreign.
Bring it on, because I think there is an opportunity. How viscous is the flow? Yeah, dude. Now every IGN video feels hollow. It feels lacking in viscosity, frankly. After watching that Death Stranding IGN video, which if you're watching this stream clip and you're like, "What the hell is he talking about?" Go watch the recent clip we did on the Death Stranding 2 preview from IGN. It's unbelievable. It's crazy. But anyway, I do think that there is an opportunity with the dynamically changing world for them to do something interesting with Nightreign. I'm excited to see what this is, because at the play test that they did, my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but my understanding is that we had a static map. Nothing changed on it. If it did change, I didn't really notice. But let's see how they actually do it in the final version.
Actually, we jumped the gun. Before we go into the ways that Limveld will change, let's quickly establish what doesn't change. The overall structure of Limveld will not change. The shape of the island, the major geographical features, the positioning of cliffs, rivers, and lakes, all of these will be the same, barring a few major exceptions that we'll cover in just a bit. The locations of Sites of Grace, Everjails, the launching Spirit Springs, cave entrances and exits, the spectral trees and the wind currents, all of these are static and do not change location from run to run. There's also a giant castle that features exceptionally tough battles and big rewards right smack in the middle of the map that will never change. Everything else, from the locations of all the rest of the points of interest, the types of rewards offered at those points of interest, to the wandering mini-bosses and the bosses that you fight at the end of Day 1 and Day 2, are left completely up to chance. That said, there are two other huge factors that can completely alter a run. The first are world events known as Shifting Earth.
What the hell is going on with this saturation, my friends? I know. I saw Fiery Phoenix in Twitch chat. Have I missed the usual complaint about IGN video game capture and compression? Here it is, my friend. This might just honestly be the game itself, but I mean, this is one ugly frame. I'll tell you what, this is an ugly frame.
Occasionally, before you even launch into a level,
can we also just take a moment to appreciate Equilibrious Beast? I almost said breast. Equilibrious Breast. What a name for a boss.
Be made aware that there is a Shifting Earth modifier in effect.
Okay.
In our playtime, the one we encountered was Crater, which transformed the northern section of the map, placing a giant crater in the middle and rivers of lava all around it. The enemies around and inside the crater are no joke, and wiped the floor with us when we first attempted to even get close enough to investigate the crater on the first day. But investigate it you should, and you should do so as soon as the second day begins, if you're up to the challenge. Exploring the crater took us pretty much the entirety of the second day, but when we did eventually make it all the way to the bottom, we beat a boss that granted us an epic rarity level reward by itself, but then also the unique reward of being able to take any weapon in our arsenal and upgrade it to the maximum level for free.
I like that stuff. That's fun. That's cool. Gives you a reason to go down there. I think with all this, it just... Maybe I should ask it this way. How do you guys remember how much this game costs? 40. Costs 40. How many hours do you need? And I want to hear from everybody in chat. How many hours do you need out of a game that you paid 40 bucks for? A live service game like this where you're playing the same map but with some modifiers and stuff, multiplayer game with your friends. How many hours do you need out of it to feel like it's worth 40? Like it's in my brain, and maybe this is part of the problem. In my brain, I cannot separate the fact that I have to get two other friends to buy it. So for me, I'm like, it's not just 40, it's like 120 bucks that we're spending to buy into this to enjoy it and play it together. So I expect a good bit more. I see 25s, I see 30s, 20, 15 to 20, at least 30, 50 for a game like this, over 100, 20 hours, I reckon. It seems like the average is right around 20 to 40. With some people saying they expect like 150. Trevi Trev, 20, Dragon Killer, 15, Lantern Smite, 150. Greatly depends on the type of game, but for 40, I expect more than 12. Even for a live service game, you'd be willing to spend 40 on a live service game that you only get 12 hours out of? Okay. I mean, I think at the very least, it seems like the average is around 20. And this game splits it into 45-minute runs. So, you know, I would expect that you're getting at least a few dozen runs out of the game to be happy with your investment. And I wonder after like 30, 40, 50 runs, how much variability there will be. And maybe there is enough to get to like 40, 50 hours. Maybe there is, but that also assumes you're doing 40, 50 runs getting all the way to the final boss, which is not something you should necessarily assume. Because when I played it, there were a few runs where we were dead within the first like 5-10 minutes because of, you know, one boss, or we didn't get the drops we needed or whatever else. But it's, again, it's very niche as a game, as a concept. And so the people that like it, I think, are going to love it. The Elden Ring fans that like roguelite stuff, this is like a dream game for them. But I think for the average FromSoft player, this probably doesn't scratch that same itch. Yeah, 40 hours is 2 to 3 weeks for me. Not too bad for 40 bucks. Yeah. I think, like, for me, I would hope to get like 20 hours, 25, 30 hours out of it, and then I'd be happy. But less than that, I start to really question whether or not it's worth 40 bucks, you know? But stuff like this is exciting.
Because in order to escape the crater, you need to use a bunch of spectral trees and ride the hawks from platform to platform as you try to escape, which will certainly lead to nail-biting escape sequences when you take too long in the crater and now must race against the clock to get out while the circle closes in around you. The other big way that runs can change are through the appearances of certain events that seem to occur completely randomly and can throw a huge wrench into an otherwise routine run. I've seen only a couple of these, and some might be familiar with the Margit invasion from the network test, in which Margit the Fell will just all of a sudden jump into your game and just mercilessly hunt your squad down wherever they are. But a new one that I encountered involved the appearance of a swirling tornado-like phenomenon in the sky. When our squad approached it, we were suddenly attacked by a very tough group of AI-controlled Nightfarers who seemingly invaded us from another world. Like typical NPC invasions in Elden Ring, these enemies were smarter and hit a lot harder than typical enemies, making it another big risk-reward consideration to explore the areas near one of these ominous swirling tornadoes in the sky. The most impactful of all of these random events, though, was the appearance of a mysterious boss that would attack from miles away with mortar shots of level-sapping bugs. That's right, get hit even just once by these telegraphed mortar strikes, and you lose a level. It's not even limited to just losing one. Get hit again, he'll take another level from you. The only way to get those levels back is to find and kill the boss by following the bugs to his hiding spot. Unfortunately, I don't have footage of this, nor do I know what the reward is for killing him, because by the time we found the boss by following the bugs, the circle had started encroaching, and we just wouldn't have been able to kill him before the circle killed us.
And this is one of those, like, some people love this. To me, that would be infuriating. Like, to me, if I was on a good run, and then I'd get invaded like with a 1 in 10 chance or a 1 in 100 chance type of drop, and then they just take my levels, and so now I'm so underleveled I can't compete. Like, I might destroy a controller, and I don't even do that. I think I would explode. Yeah, I think I'm with you, Sagittarius. Some people love it. Some people absolutely love it, but yeah, it's funny because watching these types of games and looking at these types of games is always really interesting, because it's like something that to me sounds so miserable, other people are like, oh, that's awesome. And I just find that interesting, because I'm sure there's games that I like where I'm like, I love that, and they're like, that sucks ass. It's just different tastes, you know?
Not gonna lie, it was pretty soul crushing to have to just give up on those levels that he stole from us, and it really kind of doomed our run from day one. There are certainly more of these that I still haven't encountered, like the Forest of Corruption, the Madness Towers, and more that we see in the overview trailer released by From Software. It's worth mentioning as well that if you don't like the shifting earth modifier that will affect the world, you can use the bed in the round table hold to sleep to either remove the modifier or have it replaced by something else. As devastating as some of these...
Oh. I wonder if there's a limit, like you can only do that once to reset it, or if you can just do it perpetually, because it seems weird to just be able to like re-roll it indefinitely. So it's got to be like a limit of once you can re-roll it or something. Maybe it's per day. It's like 3 re-rolls per day or something. I don't know.
Modifiers can be, I'm nonetheless eagerly anticipate seeing more of them. They inject a healthy level of chaos into what otherwise might start to feel very routine, and led to some great emergent moments with high emotion between me and my squad mates as we raced to escape the crater, or panicked at an unexpected ambush, or felt true despair as we realized the levels that were stolen from us were gone forever. Moments like these are the heart of any good roguelite, and hopefully Nightreign is able to keep them coming at a steady pace. For more...
Yeah, and they have a lot of other stuff, like the class breakdowns and stuff like that. I hope that they got it running better, though, too, because, yeah, it looks a little bit better. It's in the playtest we did, which, again, is a playtest. It's not going to be perfect. The initial performance was not very good at all. Like, the boss would start doing a lot of AoE or alpha effects and things like that, and it just caused the frame rate to tank like crazy. And so hopefully they polish that up, but I keep forgetting that the game is only like 2 weeks away. It feels like no one's talking about it except for the people that are like pretty deep into it. But, you know, maybe that's all this needs, is it just needs the really diehard committed group of 100,000 players or 200,000 players, whatever it is, a million players. I don't know what it'll get, but maybe it just needs that really committed group, and that's all they're hoping for and expecting. I expected this to have much broader appeal, hearing that it was an Elden Ring thing after how successful Elden Ring was, but I think that there's going to be a lot of Elden Ring players who might try this and just be like, oh, it feels very, very different from Elden Ring. But there's going to be a lot more of these. Like, as the industry moves forward, this is going to be a much more common thing. I think we're going to see the rise of spin-off games, of smaller AA projects and stuff, because doing another big AAA or quadruple A scale game is just so risky and expensive that it's easier to just take a brand everybody knows and do a little spin-off game. I think you'll see it with Assassin's Creed. You're going to see it with, like, I think they've tried to do with Uncharted, for example. There were rumors of the Uncharted spin-off game. They were going to work on the God of War live service game was one that they were working on at, was that Blue Point, I think, was doing that one. And so, like, they're going to keep trying to do this. This is going to be part of the new trend, is just smaller spin-off games from established IPs. So I guess we just got to get used to it. But at the very least, you got to understand
Ronald
when it's not
McDonald donated $19.99
Ronald's
through
here?
Super Chat.
Thank you for the 20.
Love
Very
your
generous.
vids. First time I've been able to catch you live. Keep her up the good work, pimp.
I will. Shout out Wendy's Chili. Yeah, I appreciate you. That's very, very generous, $20, and I appreciate you being here. Glad to have you. Yeah, it's just, sometimes the game's not for you, and I think that this is just one of those games where I'll try it at launch. We'll give it a shot. We can stream it and check it out that way. And maybe there is just gonna be something where it clicks. Because you remember, I didn't like Ghost of Tsushima at launch either. Like, my brain just didn't connect with it. And then once they did the 60 FPS update on PS5, I tried it again and fell in love with it. I was like, oh, this is fantastic. For whatever reason, at 30 frames, it wasn't for me. At 60, the combat clicked and I just ate it up. So maybe this is one of those games where the final version just clicks with me, but the playtest didn't. I don't know. I'll give it a shot. I would love to have another game to tackle. I'm getting kind of burned down on Marvel Rivals and stuff. Love something new, but we'll keep an eye on it. It's only 2 weeks away. Should try to do Discord member runs. I think that's what we're going to do.
Hey guys, it's Ken. Game programming is hard, and to me it's more difficult than many other programming domains that are common these days, though it's a very close matchup. I think I've nailed down what it is that makes it so difficult, and to fully explain it we need to cover a wide array of ideas. But to give you a quick summary before we step into those, game programming is hard because there is very little limiting structure to how you can do each individual task, combined with the fact that every added action or behavior to a game has an outrageous number of interactions with it, and even small things can take an extensive amount of time. Note that though occasionally I will put relative information or images on the screen, I don't have as much to show as in other videos, so enjoy a variety of gameplay that may or may not somehow relate to the section I'm talking about. I've been a software developer for about 18 years now. I started in C and have dipped my toes into every major language and quite a lot of minor ones. At the age of 13, I started my own web development service and have made my living off software ever since, from startups to Fortune 500. So let's focus in on web development for a moment. I started learning React in 2020, when everything was half class and half hooks and nobody really knew what the future looked like for reactive SPAs. But within 3 months I was able to create major applications, and by 6 months if you asked me to build a 5-page site for your business, I'd have it done in about 3 hours. 5 years later, and if you put a new framework in front of me, I could understand it in a couple hours and build you a professional application in a day, only because reading documentation takes time. This ability to get up and running quick in a new framework comes from 2 things. 1, general programming experience, and 2, the commonalities of all web interaction. And when I say new framework, I don't mean new TypeScript framework. A couple years ago, Elm flashed into my sphere, and within a couple hours I had a site made that let you build an interactive timeline. You could share it with others, drag and drop and all. I've done the same thing in Rust with Dioxis and Leptos, Go, Scala, yada yada yada. But 18 years of programming experience will make almost any development easier, and I don't discredit that. But the core of what allows me to get up and running so fast is that I don't understand a specific language or framework, I understand the patterns beneath all of these frameworks. That's point 2. Web development is standardized because the web is standardized. There are only so many ways to interact with a web browser, and so before I even look into a language or framework for developing a web application, I already know the underlying logic that will come into play. And if the developers also understand that logic, which, I mean, who's writing their web framework and they don't, then the specific
People have been asking me for my take on megatexturing, also known as virtual texturing, the technology used in Rage. The game got mixed press. At launch due to some glitches, and that gave megatextures a bit of a bad name. But what is this technology? What does it do? Is it any good? Was it a mistake? Now, before I get into this, I need to make one thing very clear. The technology behind Rage is often credited solely to id Software technical director John Carmack. That's not always correct, since a project of this size is going to involve a lot of people. Still, with anything this personal, it's easy to confuse criticism of the work with the criticism of the person. More importantly, I am not anywhere near an expert on this technology. I'm good at translating technological ideas into plain English, but I'm actually at the opposite end of the programming spectrum from John Carmack. He's at the forefront of inventing new stuff, and I've spent most of my career squeezing new tricks out of old technology. If John Carmack is a NASA engineer designing the next space shuttle, then I'm a guy building a trebuchet in the junkyard. Both are worthy pursuits, actually, but these are very different disciplines. A final disclaimer is that I'm saying all of these things with the benefit of years of hindsight. I don't pretend to have any advantage over Carmack, and I can admit without shame that the guy is way, way smarter than I am. Okay, disclaimer over. Let's talk about megatexturing. Before trying to understand megatexturing, it can be helpful to try and understand the problem that megatexturing was designed to solve. A texture map is just an image used to give the game world, well, texture. If you take a picture of bricks and apply that picture to a flat polygon, then your eye will accept that polygon as a brick wall. Textures are what make things in the world look like they're made of metal or stone or plastic or flesh or dirt or whatever. If you've got a great big wall in the game, you can have your texture map repeat, like patterned wallpaper. The problem is that if your wall is really big, then that repeating pattern will look very artificial or cheap to the player. It's distracting and ugly. It's like having a bit of scenery fall over during a play. It's a reminder that the whole thing is a facade. Now, you can mitigate this if you just stretch the texture out a bit more. Instead of having it repeat many times, just have it repeat once. But then you end up with the problem of having too few pixels stretched over too large an area. It looks blurry and cheap, and once again it pulls the player out of the experience. Of course, the obvious solution is to just use more pixels. Use a larger texture map with more data. If the texture itself is larger, then it will have more detail. This is exactly what's been going on in the industry. If you're a PC gamer, this is why each new generation of graphics card has more memory than the one before. Developers are making bigger and bigger textures to cram in as much detail as they can. Unfortunately, the solution scales poorly. If you want something to look twice as good, you need 4 times as much memory. The worst case scenario is the one where you have a huge wall that can be viewed both at a distance and up close, and needs to look good in both situations. There's no way around it. This requires a ton of data. Now here's where it gets tricky. Not everything needs the same amount of detail. You need lots of detail on objects that will be examined up close. Faces, weapons, office clutter. There needs to be a lot of detail in these items even though they're small. Other objects are viewed only in passing or in the dark or at a distance or through explosions and don't need much detail at all. When developing a game, the programmer will usually give the artist some kind of texture budget. This is how much data you're allowed to cram on screen at one time. The closer you get to the limit, the better your game will look. But if you use too much, if you go over that limit, then the graphics card can run out of memory. Without getting into the technical details, this is very, very bad. The game won't crash, but it will usually slow down to the point where it becomes unplayable. So it's in your interest to play this game of brinkmanship, where you try to use as much data as possible without going over the limit. A limit which will be different for each person based on their individual computer and setup. Welcome to the uncertain world of multi-platform PC development. This is bad. In general, you don't want to ask your artists to worry about technical stuff. They have enough things to worry about with their tools and their craft, and in a perfect world they shouldn't need to care about the inner workings of your game engine. It's like insisting that the person giving your car a custom paint job understand all the inner workings of the no-slip differential. One final problem with traditional texturing is that it just doesn't lend itself very well to organic or rounded surfaces. If you've ever tried to put down a tile floor in an old house, you've probably discovered what a nightmare it is to get the tiles to line up when the walls aren't at perfect 90-degree angles. You can imagine how much harder it would be if you were trying to put down tile in a round room with curving slopes to the floor. It's hard to get everything to line up just right, and fussing with those little details can eat up a lot of artist hours. It's easier to stick to boxy rooms and corridors, even if the computer is capable of drawing more interesting spaces. One of the things that makes a game world look artificial or fake is if the visuals are too homogeneous. Walls, even simple ones made of white drywall, are usually not perfect surfaces. You might think of a carpet as a solid plane of a single color, but unless it was installed yesterday, it's actually a complex map of entropy. Colors fade, carpet fibers thin out, and the surface warps. You might not notice it, but your brain does. Your brain is constantly searching for patterns in the world around you and gets bored quickly if exposed to too much repetition. If every piece of furniture in the game world is flawless, every carpet looks new, and every wall is perfectly uniform, then the world can start to look kind of strangely cartoonish or fake. It's a subtle effect, but it gets stronger as you get closer to photorealism. It's the same thing George Lucas discovered when making the first of the Star Wars movies. It's easier to make something feel authentic if you make everything look worn, scuffed, and used. The upshot is that we need a way to add a lot of unique details to surfaces without blowing our texture budget. Enter megatextures. The idea is that instead of cutting up the world into distinct textures, there's just one ultra-massive texture draped over everything. Artists no longer need to worry about texture borders or fuss with the detail versus repetition trade-off. The game only loads in the bits needed to draw the things right in front of the player. As you move around, the game is constantly pulling in new texture pieces and throwing away ones it no longer needs. You can really see megatextures at work in this large open area of Rage. Those crisscrossing tire tracks wouldn't have been practical to pull off without megatexturing. Here you could see we have one huge unbroken surface. These tire tracks match the topography of the landscape without any messy seams or repetition. You can also see it in these rock formations. In other games, it's common to just take something rock-shaped and slap a rock-like texture over it. But in Rage, it's possible for artists to depict different strata in the rock, for them to hint at the effects of erosion on exposed rock faces, and to introduce constant variations to avoid repeating patterns. Now, it's probably possible to do these things without megatextures, but it would be much, much harder and way more time-consuming. The other visual advantage of megatextures is that it seems to have given the id artists a lot more freedom with regards to architecture. I could be wrong about this one, but it seems like Rage is just a little more organic and a little more round than other games. I attribute this to the fact that texture artists didn't need to spend a bunch of time getting square textures to line up on curved surfaces. I really applaud the intent here. Instead of introducing a new graphical gimmick, megatexturing is there to give artists more freedom. Computers now have so much power, it's nice to see it used for something besides the brute force approach of making things look better by just rendering more polygons. I've said before that from now on, visual improvements will be driven by artists more than processor technology. At launch, Rage got a lot of bad press for graphical glitches and blurry visuals. Some of these problems were due to QA lapses and driver problems, but were unfortunately blamed on megatexturing. This is not to say the technology is without drawbacks. There are a lot of costs associated with megatexturing, aside from the obvious price that was paid to develop it. 1. Development costs. While the game did free up artists to add details without worrying about texture budget, it also required a lot more total work to fill in the game world. In other game engines, artists might have slapped a couple of simple, cheap textures under this highway, since it's a bit out of the way and only viewed at high speed. In Rage, the underside of the bridge is filled with wonderful, interesting detail. That's nice, but was it worth all of this extra work to add details that nearly everyone will overlook? It's not that I don't appreciate the artistry that went into it, but is this something that's financially feasible in the long run? 2. Massive game files. Since we're not reusing rectangle textures, every square inch of the game world has its own bit of texture. This means a lot more total texture data, which means the game takes up a lot more space. This isn't a huge problem, but I don't think anyone is really in a hurry to go back to the days of disk swapping, and a lot of people in the world still pay for their internet by the gigabyte. So this can have the side effect of making the game more expensive to distribute. Again, this isn't a deadly flaw, but are the improvements in Rage worth doubling or even quadrupling the size of games? 3. Compression costs. As huge as Rage is, the data would be even bigger if it wasn't compressed. It takes a very high-end, powerful computer a very long time to crank all those gigabytes of textured data through a compression system to get them down to a manageable size. This means it's probably infeasible for people with consumer-level hardware to add new levels to the game, which puts a damper on any possible modding community. 4. Technical limitations. Despite the promise of freedom for texture artists, there still seem to be some rather annoying limitations for would-be designers. Note this baffle wall in the town of Wellspring, which seems to serve no other purpose than to block line of sight from one part of town to another. The old limits of how much texture data you could show at once has kind of been replaced with new limits on how much surface area you can show at once, which is a very similar kind of problem. The upshot is your artists are still going to have to worry about technical problems for a while. 5. The PlayStation 3. Sony's strange cell architecture made it particularly hard to implement megatexturing on the PlayStation 3. Now, this is always a touchy subject, mostly because of the dysfunctional culture that surrounds modern gaming machines. Critiquing a console from an engineering standpoint will land you in an argument with people defending the machine from a consumer standpoint, which doesn't lead anywhere useful. Maybe someday I'll break down what I think is wrong with the PS3, but let's just skip that battle for now. The point is, for megatexturing to be viewed as an unqualified success, it needed to work on all the major platforms, but certain sacrifices were required to get it working with Sony's memory segregation. You can blame megatexturing or you can blame the PS3, but it doesn't change the fact that PS3 players were often unhappy with their version of Rage. In the end product, the texture detail seems to have been dialed back a bit to get the system working on current-gen machines. Which means this little computer keyboard in Rage has about the same level of detail as a similar object in Half-Life 2, which came out 7 years earlier. I'm sure somewhere around the id Software offices is a hard drive with a master copy of this object showing all the wonderful detail we're not seeing. We came all this way, and the real benefits of megatexturing wound up on the cutting room floor. Again, this is conjecture on my part, but I think the number one reason that things worked out this way is the fact that it just simply takes too much time and too much money to try something new. In the old days, if you had an idea, you could just throw together a prototype in a week, test it out, and decide if you liked it or not. You don't have this luxury of experimentation when it takes months to develop your prototype and dozens of people just to make some test content. This effect is multiplied if you have to build different prototypes for all of your hardware platforms. I suggest that the costs of megatexturing only became apparent once id Software had already gone all in with it, and changing technology would have required starting over. and we all know how well that usually works out. Wrapping up, I wouldn't write off megatextures. There's still a lot of work that could be done in this area, and a few ways that these various costs could be mitigated. It's easy to look back on Rage and pick apart all the flaws with megatexturing, but only with the benefit of hindsight. None of this was obvious way back in 2004 when these ideas were first being considered. At one time, bump mapping was an idea on some engineer's dry erase board, and now it's part of almost every major game on the market. There's no way to know if your idea is the next bump mapping except to try it. The old saying goes, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Unfortunately, to venture anything these days costs millions of dollars in a couple of years. I also want to point out that the only reason we can have this conversation is because of the transparency within id Software and their willingness to talk about their technology. I'm sure a lot of companies try new things, but they don't divulge anything, and so the rest of us can't learn anything from the process. So I want to say thanks to id Software for being willing to try new things and being willing to talk about them openly. And while I'm at it, thanks for Rage, which I think was kind of underrated.